Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Was the Son of Fem-Kyuubi and Minato. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Under the leadership of the fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato, the village was in peace and the people were content because the war with the Hidden Rock had ended and everything was getting better. The people were joyful, but the Hokage himself was miserable because he had to fight the village's very evil, which was concealed in the leaves and was known as paperwork. Minato let his thoughts wander about how to complete this more quickly after signing another document, until he recalled the Forbidden Cage Bunshin no Jutsu technique. It was ideal because it would produce a strong clone of himself, and when that clone was destroyed, he would acquire all the knowledge they had acquired. He needed a break after 2 days of paperwork, so he made the hand sign, Cage Bushin no Jutsu, and made 4 clones, even though he later realized that it was a high-ranking jutsu that shouldn't be used for such inappropriate purposes. After that, he leapt out the window and ran directly into the forest outside the village. Minato felt at least at peace once he was in the middle of the forest, far from everything, until he heard a woman scream in agony. He yelled, "What was that?" and dashed toward the commotion. Minato saw a woman with red hair, a stunning face, large breasts, and a bright red kimono when he arrived at the clearing where the noise was coming from. Even though she was in pain and was bleeding quite a bit, it was her red eyes, claws, cheek whisker marks, 2 fox ears on her head, and 9 tails behind her that caught his attention. "Damn you Yamada, you snake bastard, the next time I see you I'm going to tear your eyes out your head, all 8 of them," she whispered as Minato drew closer. When Minato heard this, he made the decision to approach a woman to ask if he could be of assistance. He went into the clearing and asked, "Miss, do you need some help?" With hateful glares in her red eyes, the woman glared at Minato and growled, "What do you want, human?" Minato was repelled by a human, but based on her appearance, she was probably a demon. Despite this, he didn't mind because she needed assistance, and one of the few practical things his sensei taught him when he wasn't snooping on women was to assist women in need. After approaching her as closely as he could, Minato said, "You look like you could use some help." "I don't need the help of some filthy human. I am the great Kyuubi no Yoko, the strongest of the tailed beast, and I don't need help from you, so leave me alone, mortal," Kyuubi said, hissing in pain and holding her shoulder as the women yelled at him with even more hatred than before. Minato was taken aback. Was this the Kyuubi without Yoko? Was this egocentric, obnoxious, and attractive woman the Kyuubi? Minato considered this, but he kept his attention on the task at hand because he wanted to assist her regardless of her feelings. He removed her hand from her shoulder to examine the wound, which was heavily bruised and gushing blood. He surmised that the green substance oozing from the wound was Yamada no Orochi's poison. Naturally, the fact that this human had the audacity to touch her after she explicitly told him to fuck off and leave her alone infuriated Kyuubi, who yelled at him, "How dare you touch me, you fucking hairless ape, what gives you the right to touch me? Just leave me alone before I de-ice to make you into a meal. You're nothing but..." Kyuubi was interrupted by Minato. "Will you shut the fuck up? I'm trying to help you here, so will you just shut up already and let me help you?" The fact that this man, a human, would dare to tell Yoko to stop talking had angered Kyuubi. She had to admit that he had guts. Soon Minato was saying, "This wound on your shoulder looks really bad, we need to get it looked at or else it could get worse." Since Kyuubi's chakra was so low that even a mere human could kill her, she had no choice but to swallow her pride because she didn't like the way things were going and knew that Yamada's poison would kill her. She asked Minato, "What can you do to help, human?" after giving him a quick glance. The Kyuubi no Yoko, the strongest of the tailed beasts, was requesting assistance from a human, and Minato simply stared at her as if she had slapped him across the face. When he didn't respond, Kyuubi became irritated. "Hey Baka human, what can you do to help? I know some healing jutsu that could work, but we need to get you to the village where an expert can help," Minato said, jolting out of his reverie. When Kyuubi heard this, she wanted to protest that while she could accept one human's assistance, she could not go to a human village. "No, there is no way I'm going to some filthy human village, I would rather die," she declared. "All right, we won't go to the village, let's at least get started on healing that wound," Minato said calmly, and he started the signs for the healing technique. Soon, green charka surrounded Minato's hands, which he placed on the wound, and the wound started to heal gradually. Minato simply sighed, "Why do women have to be so stubborn?" Minato asked Kyuubi if she felt any better after he was done. Kyuubi moved her arm slightly, but the pain persisted. "It still hurts, but the pain has dulled, thanks. What's your name anyway?" Kyuubi asked, to which Minato replied, "Namikaze Minato." After hearing his name, Kyuubi simply glanced at him and remarked, "Namikaze Minato is a nice name for a human." Kyuubi examined the wound after he was done. It was not completely healed, but the poison was largely gone, and there were still indications of infection. Minato simply glanced at Kyuubi and the wound, realizing that he needed a professional examination. "That's the best I could do, but we're going to have an expert look at it, so you have to come back to the village," Minato said with a sigh as he turned to face Kyuubi. Kyuubi scowled at him upon hearing this and uttered the words, "No, I will not go to a filthy human village." As his left eye started to twitch with frustration, Minato said angrily, "You're going with me to the village and that's final." He then reached over to Kyuubi, grabbed her, and placed her on his shoulder. "How dare you, you filthy hairless monkey, put me down this instant. I am the Kyuubi no Yoko and you will put me down now, you hentai. You filthy hentai hairless monkey," she said, slapping him on his back and striking his head with her tails. Kyuubi became enraged by this and told him about it. She eventually gave up and stopped, choosing to simply lie there as he made his way to the village. "We're almost to the village now, and I can either let you down and let you walk there with some dignity, or I can keep carrying you like a child through the entire village," Minato said, glancing at her as they approached the village. Even though Kyuubi didn't care what people thought, she still had some pride as a demon, so she was shocked that he was calling her a child and would humiliate her in this way. "I will not run away, please put me down," she said, clenching her teeth as she glanced at Minato. After Minato followed her instructions, they continued walking until they arrived at the village gate, where two Junin greeted them. "Hokage. Sama, where have you been?" they asked simultaneously. Kyuubi thought, "This baka is the leader of a village?" as he gazed at Minato in disbelief. "Take this woman to Tsunade and tell her that I'm calling in that favor from a while back," Minato said, glancing at the Junin. Upon seeing the woman, the two men recognized her right away and turned to face their leader. "Hokage. Sama, with all due respect, you want us to take this demon to Tsunade, Sama. If that's a problem with you, you can do D-rank missions for the next 2 years instead," Minato said, giving the two a glare. Without missing a beat, the two retorted, "We will gladly escort the young women to Tsunade, Sama, right away." 2 whole years of D-rank missions was a ninja's worst nightmare. "Good. Then I'll leave her in your capable hands," Minato said with a smile to the Junin. He turned to Kyuubi and said, "I'll come by and check on you later. Yane Kyuubi. Chan." Minato then used Hiraishin no Jutsu to depart. The words, "he called Maya Kyuubi Chan," were all that Kyuubi could think about as he stood there. Before long, the three of them were strolling through the village. Kyuubi stood behind the two Junin, listening to the rumors that were being spread about her, but she chose to ignore them. The Junin were now standing in front of a blonde woman with a green coat and a jewel on her head after they had reached the hospital. As they approached her, the two Junin said coolly, "Tsunade. Sama the Hokage. Sama wishes for your medical experience in order to help this woman behind us." Tsunade did nothing but sit there and stare at them. Simply exchanging glances, the two reiterated to her, "Tsunade. Sama the Hokage. Sama wishes for your medical experience in order to help this woman behind us." Tsunade did nothing at all. The two Junin exchanged glances, and one of them waved his hand in front of her and snapped his fingers, but nothing happened. Eventually, they approached her closely and could hear her snoring. As they exchanged glances, the two Junin said, "She's asleep with her eyes open again." After learning that Minato wanted this woman to heal her, Kyuubi became irritated and approached the Junin desk, unsure of what to do. Kyuubi glared as he stood directly in front of Tsunade before kicking the desk and yelling, "Hey Baba, wake the fuck up." No one called her a hag, so Tsunade took notice. "Who are you calling a hag, you little bitch?" she asked Kyuubi. Since Inu and Kitsune had never gotten along and being called a dog was a big mistake, Kyuubi became enraged and decided to tell Tsunade, "How dare you call one of those filthy fleabags? I'm a fox for your information." Tsunade finally realized she had 9 tails and fox ears after hearing this, and she remarked anxiously, "You're a demon." After giving the two Jonin a furious glance, Tsunade remarked, "You brought me a demon to my office." "We were only following orders from the Hokage. He said you would do it because of a favor," the two said, terrified. "I hate that Gaki sometimes," Tsunade muttered, rubbing her temples. She then turned to Kyuubi and said, "Follow me and we'll see what the problems are." She then turned to the two Jonin and said, "Go find Shizune and tell her to meet me in examining room 1. After exchanging, "Hi, Tsunade. Sama," responses, the two departed. When Kyuubi entered the room, Tsunade made her take off her clothes so she could examine her wound. She discovered some bruising and a tiny amount of poison still present. When Tsunade saw that Kyuubi was blushing a bit and avoiding eye contact while she was examining her, she smirked and told her, "You don't have to be embarrassed, you have a very beautiful body," which made Kyuubi's redness worse. Shortly after, Shizune arrived to assist Tsunade by ingesting the poison to test her ability to create a counteragent for one of the most lethal poisons ever. Kyuubi wanted to object, but Tsunade interrupted with "doctor's orders," and walked away after wrapping the wound with bandages and dressing her in a hospital gown. "The wound is nearly healed, but we're not sure about the poison, so you'll have to stay here for a few days," Tsunade said. After a while, Kyuubi was so bored that she was going to run away and officially despise hospitals. Just as she was about to do so, there was a knock on the door. Minato was standing there when it opened, grinning and holding some flowers. "Human, what are you doing here and why did you bring flowers with you?" Kyuubi asked, staring at him and wondering why he had brought her a bunch of flowers. With a simple smile, Minato replied, "I came by to see if you were okay, and the flowers are just a gift to show someone that you are happy they're okay." With a slight flush, Kyuubi questioned, "Are Thosia for me?" "Of course they are. Who else would they be for but a beautiful woman like you?" Minato simply grinned. "Did I say that out loud?" Minato asked, and Kyuubi nodded her head, causing both humans and demons to flush. Minato started to feel anxious and wanted to leave. He was just about to do so when he turned away from Kyuubi and felt a pull on his arm. When he turned, Kyuubi was holding him. "Did you mean what you said? Do you really think that I'm a beautiful?" Kyuubi asked, glancing at him. Simply glancing at her, Minato said, "Hi, I think you're beautiful, Kyuubi-chan." When Kyuubi looked at him, she was unable to comprehend her feelings and was at a loss for words. She had always been by herself, but when this man entered her life, she found herself unable to think clearly. 3 pairs of Isa Tsunade, Shizune, and Minato's sensei Jiraiya appeared into the room from the other side of the door, observing the young man and demon to see what was going on. "So do you think those two will get together or what?" Tsunade asked her teammate. Jiraiya glanced at her. "Maybe, who knows? Tell you the truth, I hope so. The Gaki needs a girl in his life, and she looks perfect for him as far as demons go." "Why do you think I'm beautiful, Minato? I'm not even a human, why do you think that?" Kyuubi asked, getting out of bed and approaching Minato, who was still in shock over what had just transpired on the previous occasion. Minato gave her a look. He was aware that she wasn't human and that what she was saying was accurate. It was socially unacceptable to even consider his feelings for a demon, but he didn't care because he loved her. He didn't care what people thought because he was in love with Kyuubi no Yoko. With a smile on his face, Minato put his hand on Kyuubi's cheek. Confused, Kyuubi said, "Kyuubi, the reason I say you are beautiful is because of what I'm trying to say is that a Kyuubi-chan, I love you." Minato then kissed Kyuubi. Kyuubi was taken aback. She found it enjoyable that the man she initially perceived as just another human being was kissing her, but she was unable to move or think about it. It didn't matter that he was a human. She loved him and she loved it. The 3-person group outside grew into a horde of people who were all attempting to see why their Hokage would be in the same room as a female demon. To their astonishment, they witnessed him passionately kissing her and hearing him declare his love for her. When the two were done and had taken a moment to catch their breath, they looked at one another and the first thing that escaped their lips was, "I love you." A clapping sound was heard after that, and Minato's sensei Jiraiya appeared, in addition to Tsunade, a few other medical professionals, nurses, and civilians. Even though Jiraiya was a perverta not even close to a super perverta, he was still the closest thing Minato had ever had to a father. And at the moment, he was terrified that he wouldn't acknowledge his feelings for Kyuubi. Taking a serious look at his pupil, Jiraiya remarked, "Minato, you do realize that having relations with a demon are not accepted by everyone in the world." "I understand that, Jiraiya-sama, but I really do love Kyuubi-chan and I would do anything to be with her," Minato said, turning to face his former sensei. Putting his hand on his shoulder, Jiraiya grinned at his pupil and said, "I'm proud of you, Gaki. You have a good woman there, and I give you my blessing." At his old sensei, Minato grinned and said, "Thank you, Jiraiya-sensei." Jiraiya grinned once more and added, "I also wish to give you a gift as well." He took out a book from his coat that read Icha Icha Paradise Volume 3 Limited Editions. When a loud hentai was uttered, Jiraiya was launched through the air and collided with the wall separating Konoha from the outside world. Minato's left eye twitched at this point, and Tsunade was clenching her knuckles in preparation to murder her teammate. Minato only had to glance at Kyuubi to notice that, despite punching his sensei through a hospital wall, her fist was exactly where Jiraiya's face was and that it wasn't even bruised. "I'll pay for that, Tsunade. Sama," Minato said, glancing at Tsunade. She then grinned and said, "Don't worry about it. You also have my blessing as, I like this girl." Minato grinned and turned to face Kyuubi, who grinned back at her despite her continued anger toward his sensei. She at least voiced her opinions. Minato was shocked to learn that Kyuubi had a soft spot for children and was frequently spotted at the orphanage assisting the kids and bringing them toys and candy. As the months passed, Kyuubi and Minato grew closer and closer, going on dates and spending as much time as they could together. Kyuubi learned medical jutsu under Tsunade's tutelage when she wasn't interacting with children. She quickly picked it up and was able to perform even the most difficult procedures with ease thanks to her almost limitless supply of charka. The village also loved Kyuubi. Initially, they were terrified of her and believed she was corrupting their leader, but they eventually realized why he loved her and reciprocated his feelings. The older generation and Minato's fangirls were the main groups that continued to dislike her, but they took no action. The two had met exactly a year prior after returning home from a date at Minato's favorite ramen stand, Ichiraku. Much to Kyuubi's dismay, she didn't mind, but she was curious as to where he had stored 27 bowls of ramen. When they got to Minato's mansion, Kyuubi made the decision to take a shower. While there, she reflected on all the time she had spent with the man she loved and concluded that it was time. When the bedroom door opened as Minato was getting ready for bed, he saw Kyuubi in a bathrobe, dripping wet from her shower, but what really caught his eye was how almost seen her breasts were. He felt Kyuubi's tongue in his mouth as she approached him and put her lips on his, surprising him by deepening them. He simply relished the sensation. "Minato-kun, you know I love you, right?" Minato asked. "What's gotten into you, Kyuubi-chan?" As they paused for air, Kyuubi simply looked at him and answered. Despite his confusion, Minato responded, "Of course, and I love you, Kyuubi-chan. What's wrong?" with concern. Kyuubi simply glanced at him and responded, "Nothing's wrong, Minato-kun. It's just that we've been together for a year and it's been the happiest time of my life. You have always been there for me, even when we first meet you were there for me." After hearing all of this, Minato was a little taken aback, but she allowed Kyuubi to go on. Kyuubi began to cry and continued, "All my life I was alone. I wasn't born like most kitsune who are born with one tail. I was born with 9 tails and everyone was afraid of my power. Even my own parents were afraid of me. I could tell they loved me, but there was still the fear in their eyes." Minato tried to get Kyuubi to talk about her past, but she always said it wasn't important. Now that he knew why, he was shocked that she never did. The reason for this was that it evoked unpleasant memories. "I was alone for so long and then I met you, a mere human who just wanted to help me and who wasn't afraid of me. That is when I started to love you," Kyuubi said, continuing her statement. "And after all the time I have been with you and come to this decision, Minato-kun, would you be my mate?" Kyuubi asked, sobbing into his chest. To say Minato was taken aback would be an understatement. He was aware of what she was asking because she was pleading with him to become his wife and her husband. "Kyuubi-chan, you are asking me to do something big, and it is only right that I do this," Minato said, looking at Kyuubi. Minato then got down on one knee, held Kyuubi's hand, and took out a box containing a ring. "Kyuubi-chan, will you marry me and be my wife and I your mate?" Minato asked. With tears in her eyes, Kyuubi said, "Hello, Minato-kun, I'll marry you." Minato then stood up and gave Kyuubi another passionate, slightly lustful kiss. Soon after dawn, Minato and Kyuubi heard a loud banging from the front door. They dressed and went to the front door, where they saw Tsunade and Jiraiya. One of them was grinning foolishly, while the other was furious. Jiraiya took a step forward and grinned at his pupil, saying, "Congratulations, my boy. You're now a man at last." "What are you talking about, sensei?" Minato asked, flushed at the sound. In response, Tsunade glared at him and said, "What we are talking about is the fact that you two kept the whole village up last night with your screaming." Hearing that they kept the entire village up with their lovemaking made Minato and Kyuubi flush. Kyuubi was blushing and wanted to object, but she knew it wouldn't work. Tsunade grabbed her before they could explain, saying, "Get moving, there is no way I'm going to let one of my students give birth to a bastard baby. You're going to get married and that's that." "Come on, Gaki, we have a wedding to prepare for," Jiraiya said as he stood beside his pupil. Everyone was anxious, including Minato and Kyuubi, who were both sweating profusely and were being calmed down by Shizune, Kyuubi's bridesmaid, and Hyuga Hishi, Minato's best friend and best man. The wedding was scheduled for noon. Hishi attempted to reassure Minato that everything would be fine by saying, "Minato, you need to calm down. Your pacing is seriously causing a hole in the floor." "How can I be calm? It's my wedding. What if something goes wrong? What if Kyuubi decides she doesn't want to marry? What if? Minato asked, looking down and noticing that he was in a hole. Shizune was present to try to soothe Kyuubi by giving her a paper bag to breathe into, but Hishi was beginning to grow irritated. "It's okay, Kyuubi-chan. Just breathe, everything okay. We don't need stress on you or the baby," Shizune said as he rubbed her back. "Calm? How can I be calm? It's my wedding, and I can barely breathe in this damn dress, and it's virgin white, and this baby is messing with my body, so how can I be calm, damn it?" Kyuubi said, looking at her interspersed with a gasp. Shizune simply sighed as he waited for this to be over. After everything was in place and everyone was present, including two individuals with robes covering their faces. While Hishi stood beside him, offering support and ensuring he didn't flee, Minato stood at the altar, waiting for the bride to be sweating profusely. The altar music soon started, and Minato turned to see Kyuubi in a virgin white gown approaching him while a young girl wearing a pink kimono held the dress's back. The girl was Mitarashi Anko. Many started to question why a traitor's student would be permitted to attend the wedding of Konoha's two most esteemed citizens, but Minato understood her purpose. They both knew Anko wouldn't betray the village like her sensei did, and Kyuubi probably personally asked her to be there. This was probably due to Kyuubi's fondness for children. When Kyuubi arrived at her mate, she grinned and turned to face him. After everything was in order, Sarutobi, the man who would legally marry Tama, arrived. When Minato grinned and said, "Hey old man," Kyuubi slapped her in the head and said, "Respect, darling." Sarutobi was nearing the conclusion of the traditional marriage vows. Seeing that some people wanted to speak but refrained out of fear, Sarutobi declared, "So as the previous Hokage of this village, I would like to pronounce these two husband and wife, and mates. Are there any objections to this?" When Sarutobi saw no objections, he said, "Please step forward if you would like to offer a word of congratulations." Nobody was expected to speak up at this point until the two members wearing hoods said, "We have something to say." Kyuubi caught their scent and looked shocked, while Minato looked at the two and didn't trust them. A man and a woman wearing black and white silk kimonos were revealed when the two removed their robes. They appeared to be in their 30s, but what really grabbed everyone's attention were the whisker marks on their faces, the fox ears on their heads, and the black and white tails behind Tama, all of which were kitsunes. They were all attempting to identify these demons when Kyuubi uttered the words, "Kasen, a Tucson." Everyone was taken aback by this, and Minato became enraged. "What do you want?" he asked, glancing at the two. When Kyuubi told him about her past, the two did not seem surprised by the Minato's response, saying, "Human, we are here to witness the marring of our daughter." Minato was furious. "What right do you two have to be here, Kyuubi? Chan told me about her past, how you were afraid of her, how you—" Before Minato could continue, Kyuubi interrupted, saying, "Minato-kun, it's okay, I want them here." Minato wanted to object, but he decided to accept it since he knew she was obstinate. Kyuubi blushed when her mother said, "Kyuubi-chan, you look beautiful," to her daughter. Sarutobi. "Sama, we should move forward with the wedding," Kyuubi's father said as he moved forward and turned to face Sarutobi. Stunned, Kyuubi and Minato questioned, "You know each other?" After Kyuubi's mother slapped him in the head, "Baka Kitsune," Kyuubi's father grinned like a fox and said, "Hello. Your mother was a bit of an oddball and wanted to see what it would be like to marry like a human, so we came here and get married under Sarutobi Sama." The two kissed. Jiraiya then took a picture of the two after Sarutobi concluded the vows. The party soon began, with everyone laughing and savoring the food while Kyuubi's parents related how she used to be a shy child who would jump at a leaf, and Jiraiya related stories about Minato being a loudmouth brat. Kyuubi's father approached Jiraiya as they were conversing and said, "You are Jiraiya of the Toad, correct?" Jiraiya gave him a slightly uneasy look before noticing that he was taking Icha Parade's volume out of his kimono. One and asked, "Will you sign for me?" But Kyuubi blushed in embarrassment at her father, and her mother saw it and said, "Loosen up, Kyuubi-chan, you're going to get wrinkles and it's not good for the baby either, and it's a good book for the sex life." Everyone else started laughing. "Ka-san," Kyuubi exclaimed as she turned to face her mother. The mother of Kyuubi simply gazed at her and said, "What? It's because of that book you were born in Konoha." Kyuubi wondered, "What are you talking about?" as she glanced at her book. "We were looking for the latest edition of that book when my water broke, and well, you know the rest," Kyuubi said, glancing at her. Soon after, Kyuubi threw the bouquet into the air, and several unmarried women started squabbling over it. One of them missed it, and when she saw it fall into Mitarashi Anko's hands, she stumbled backwards and fell into Yumino Uruka's hands, blushing as she looked at his face. The celebration soon came to an end, and everyone was saying goodbye as Kyuubi and Minato departed for their 3-month honeymoon in the land of hot springs. After 9 months, the baby was almost due, and everyone, including the soon-to-be parents, was preparing for it. With one arm in a cast due to Kyuubi's mood swings, Minato was working on paperwork in his office when his secretary arrived and announced, "Hokage Sama, your wife has gone into labor." As soon as Minato heard this, he leapt out the window and headed to the hospital, where he heard Kyuubi yell, "Get this fucking thing out of me damn it." When Minato eventually located the room, he saw his wife yelling and hurling objects and people. Tsunade had to use all of her strength to keep her motionless, but when Minato followed instructions and held her hand, she broke it. 2 hours later, a baby boy with blonde hair, blue eyes like his father, whisker marks on his face, fox ears on his head, and 10 tails was pulled into the world at the last second after a last push. Kyuubi and Minato gazed at their son, the very thing they had created, a baby boy who was neither human nor demon or Hanua, but they would still adore him regardless. "What do you think we should name him?" Kyuubi asked, grinning at her partner. When Minato saw her, he grinned and said, "How about we call him Naruto?" Kyuubi's eye twitched, like the topping for ramen. Minato grinned like a fox and scratched the back of his head. They saw Naruto laughing and heard laughter. Seeing that she was outnumbered in the vote, Kyuubi grinned and said, "Naruto, you have a bright future ahead of you." After 3 years, the 3 years that had passed since Minato and Kyuubi first met, got married, mated, and had Naruto were among the greatest in Konoha's history. Shortly after Naruto, Hishi and his spouse also welcomed a daughter, whom they named Hinata. Despite Minato and Hishi's desire for Naruto and Hinata to be friends, obstacles kept getting in the way of their meeting. For example, when Hishi had to attend to clan business or Kyuubi had to visit her parents and bring Naruto along. Then, on the day that the two men had their chance, ninja from Kumogakure no Sato arrived to offer Konoha peace. Given that Cloud wanted the meeting to take place inside the Hyuga compound, Minato saw this as both a fantastic opportunity for a new ally and a means for Naruto to meet Hinata. After the alliance was announced, a celebration was held throughout Konoha to greet the Cloud diplomats. Minato, Kyuubi, and Naruto all wore formal kimonos to honor the occasion as they walked to the Hyuga compound to wait for the Cloud shinobi. Naruto, the tiny half-demon, hid behind his parents as they were strolling through the village. This was not because he was shy, but rather because he was afraid of the local humans. Flashback: in an attempt to emulate his father, Naruto spent the night reading rather than sleeping in his room 1 year ago. He was so preoccupied that he failed to notice the person slinking through his window. Naruto was studying a few scrolls of his father's sealing techniques. When Naruto turned around after finishing the scroll, the man who had broken into his room grinned and said, "Hello, who are you?" After glaring down at Naruto and brandishing a kunai, the man started to frighten Naruto about what that man might do. Naruto was about to flee when the man moved forward and approached him, but the man grabbed his arm and pushed him to the ground. The man stabbed Naruto in the shoulder, but before he could scream, he covered his mouth, preventing him from doing so. With a menacing smile, the man expressed his enjoyment of inflicting pain on the young child. He soon burst out laughing when he noticed tears streaming from Naruto's eyes. With a hint of madness in his eyes, the man said, "You filthy demon spawn, you and that whore of a demon mother. You should never be allowed into this village or this world. If anything, you should be a weapon of our village, you damn demon." Given that some of the people would call him a monster and half-breed behind his parents' backs, Naruto felt as though he knew this man was telling the truth when he said these words. The man felt a sharp pain in his arm as he was about to deliver the fatal blow with another kunai. He looked to see that his arm was gone and on the other side of the room. When he screamed in agony, the man turned to see Kyuubi standing there, her eyes glowing blood red chakra encircling her, and her teeth enlarged as she snarled at him. The man merely glanced at Kyuubi and would have spoken if he hadn't heard an odd noise behind him. Then he saw Minato holding a Rasengan, which he threw directly into the intruder's chest, instantly killing him. Once that was finished, Kyuubi swiftly took the kunai off of Naruto's shoulder and applied some healing chakra to it, noticing that Naruto's demon chakra had almost healed it. As Minato examined the deceased, he discovered that it was Danzo, a council member and the head of the Anbu Root program, which Minato intended to dissolve after witnessing the abuses inflicted on the children who joined it. Once he had taken care of his family, he would investigate further. After completing Naruto's recovery, Kyuubi buried himself in his mother's chest. He was crying out of physical pain, but he was also dealing with the pain of emotional harm. Because as soon as Minato turned to face Naruto, his son began yelling and flailing in his mother's arms, seemingly afraid of his father. "What's wrong, Naruto-kun? It's okay now," Kyuubi said, looking down at her son. Naruto refused to listen, instead yelling, and when Minato attempted to approach him, he swung at him with his claws, slightly cutting Minato's hand and causing it to bleed a little. Both Kyuubi and Minato were taken aback by this and came to the same conclusion. Naruto had grown afraid of his father, but probably of all people. Minato was devastated because, in addition to failing to protect his family, his own son was now terrified of him and probably detested him. For the first time in years, he was unable to control his tears as they started to well up in his eyes at this thought. Kyuubi was also crying because she had failed as a mother and a mate, and it was a sworn duty for all kitsune to protect their kits at all costs. Shortly after calming down, Naruto became interested in the scent of salt and blood. Because of him, Naruto was able to see his Oto-san crying as well as his Ka-san crying. When Naruto saw the tiny cut on Oto-san's hand and the blood on his claws, he realized what he had done. Even though Naruto was still a little scared of his father, he still loved him in his heart, so he broke free from his mother's hold and went to embrace him. It would be difficult to win Naruto's trust again, but Minato was glad to see that a piece of his son was still present when he hugged him. Months passed after that night, and initially Naruto barely left his room or spoke to anyone. He even ran away from people who had raised him, such as Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune, out of fear. His mother and her parents, who were demons, and his father, whom he would recoil at, appeared to be the only people who could approach him. Soon after, Minato and Kyuubi made the decision to place Naruto in therapy and enlisted Sarutobi, who was known as the professor for a reason of the Yamanaka clan, who were skilled in mental health, and the Haruno, who were skilled in certain medical fields. When Naruto first met the daughters of Sakura and Ino's family while seeking their assistance, he didn't want anything to do with them, but gradually he started to have some, if not much, faith in them. That's how it continued for a while, and as Naruto improved every day, he concentrated on his studies and even started asking his mother how to use Kitsune Chakra, which she gladly taught him. Final flashback: the memories, especially Naruto's, were still vivid in the Namikaze's minds despite the passage of time. A young branch member, slightly older than Naruto, welcomed the family to the Hyuga compound, introduced himself as Neji, and showed them to the Hyuga council room. When the three entered the room, they saw a young girl standing next to a number of elderly Hyuga clan members, including Hyuga Heishi and his wife, Hyuga Aki. Heishi and Minato both bowed as they turned to face their old friend. Given that Kyuubi had supported Aki during her pregnancy with Hinata and that they had grown close ever since, the two grinned at one another. It was assumed that the children would get along well with each other because the adults were getting along so well, but Naruto and Hinata instead spent most of their time glaring at one another. "Why do I have to spend time with this brat?" each of them asked their parents, turning to face one another. "Who are you calling brat?" They exchanged glances before they began snarling at one another. The parents appeared dissatisfied with the way their kids treat each other. Naruto stepped forward and yelled at Hinata, "What's your problem anyway? Why do you act so high and mighty?" Before their parents could say anything to support him. Hinata was moved by that and told him, "I don't act all high and mighty, you filthy half-breed. Shut up, you freaky white-eyed bitch." Naruto was shocked that only one person had called him that, and the pain from that night had returned to the point where he was unable to control himself. A shout of "Naruto" and "Hinata" echoed through the compound shortly after. "Will you excuse us for a moment?" the parents asked each other after glancing at their kids before grabbing their kids and leaving in different directions around the compound. Using Naruto with disappointment and rage in their eyes, Kyuubi and Minato gazed down at Naruto. Naruto recognized this and kept his head down. "What the hell is wrong with you these days, Naruto? You're acting like everyone is against you," Kyuubi said calmly as she glanced down at her son. Naruto protested, looking up at his mother, "But Ka-san, that's not true. I only treat human beings who pose a threat to me." With a hint of embarrassment in her eyes, Kyuubi gazed down at her son, recalling how she used to act toward humans and how Naruto was acting against them. "I know how you feel about humans, believe me, I really do," Kyuubi said, looking down at her son. I used to feel the same way about humans, until I met a very special human, a human who didn't care that I was a demon, he just wanted to be there for me and love me. When Naruto learned that his mother had once behaved similarly to him until she met someone who changed her, he was shocked and had to ask, who was this human that changed you, Ka-san? It was Uratu-san who changed me into a better person, Kyuubi said with a smile on her face before turning to leave, but not before saying, Naruto, I really want you to apologize to Hinata, not right away but eventually. Wondering why his mother would want him to be with this Hinata human in the first place, Naruto simply stared at her. Using Hinata, Aki and Hinata were conversing similarly, and they were looking at each other just as closely as Kyuubi and Naruto were. Hinata, why are you acting so rudely against our guest? Aki asked her daughter. Because some of the Hyuga elders who were teaching Hinata had recently been pressuring her to do things that pleased them, claiming it was for the benefit of the clan. Hinata simply frowned and showed little concern for the visitor, especially the half-breed. Hinata eventually came to genuinely believe that the elders were correct when they said that the clan was flawless and incapable of wrongdoing and that anything or anyone that was different was not worthy of life. The teachings were supposed to be a fair and honorable leader, not a puppet on a string, but neither Aki nor Heishi knew what was being taught to Hinata. They initially believed it was just stress from Hinata's studies, but over time, they noticed a shift in her behavior from playing fully using the curse seal on Bratch members to publicly yelling that they were beneath her clan. In summary, aside from her parents, Hinata had turned icy and heartless. When her daughter refused to respond, Aki looked down at her and said, Hinata, I noticed some changes with you while being taught under the Hyuga elders. Hi, Ka-san. I have been acting like a true Hyuga should be showing others that they are beneath me and that they have no right to exist without me. Are you proud of me, Ka-san? Hinata grinned at this, believing that her mother would be pleased that she was behaving like a true Hyuga. When Hinata noticed that Aki was staring down at her daughter with disgust, she was about to ask what was wrong but was slapped across the face by Aki, sending her flying across the hallway. Every time Hinata touched the spot where her mother had struck her, she felt a slight sting. Sana, why? She asked her mother. Because you are no daughter of mine, you are nothing but a doll of the elders, and you disgust me, Aki said, glaring down at her daughter with utter hatred and disgust. Aki then slammed the door behind her and left for another room. As Hinata gazed at the door where her mother had gone, she could feel tears welling up in her eyes. She had been taught that crying was a sign of weakness, which the Hyuga clan did not. Ka-san. Why do you hate me? I did everything the elders told me to do to make you and Oto-san proud of me. Why do you hate me? Hinata asked herself as tears started to fall from her eyes, expressing her lack of concern for the clan or anything else at the time. Aki stood on the other side of the door, listening to her daughter as she squeezed her fist so tightly that tears were streaming from her eyes and tiny drops of blood were dripping from her hands. Minato and Hashi were in one of the offices, doing their best not to look at their oldest friend while the mothers were speaking to their kids. Hashi about Naruto. Minato finally found the courage to say, but Hashi cut him off, saying, Minato, Naruto is not to blame for what happened, it was the attack on him those months ago. Minato wanted to defend Hinata when she heard this, but she was at a loss for words. When Kyuubi encountered Aki, she was walking with the women to the office where her friends were coming from. Aki was sitting on the floor, staring down at the floor with blood on her hands. When Kyuubi saw this, he hurried to Aki, terrified, asking, Aki, what happened? Why are you crying? Why is there blood on your hands? The elder said they turned Hinata into a Kyuubi, Aki began, but she stopped short as she buried her head in Kyuubi's shoulder after glancing into her bloodshot, wet eyes. Despite not understanding what Aki was discussing, Kyuubi chose to take her to Hashi because he was the only one who would know what to do. Shortly after, Kyuubi discovered Hashi and her partner. When Hashi saw Aki, the usually upbeat woman whose spirit never died, she became frightened and rushed to her. Hashi worriedly inquired, Aki-chan, what's wrong? Did something happen to you? That not even Minato was aware of? Speaking while glancing at her husband, Aki said, Hashi, they did it to her, they're the reasons why Hinata has been acting this way. When Hashi heard this, he was frantic to find out why his wife was upset and what had happened to his daughter. Aki started out by describing what Hinata had told her, what the elders were teaching her, and the reason behind her peculiar behavior. Everyone reacted differently after hearing this. Hiyashi's blood was boiling over, Kyuubi's eyes were blood red, and red chakra surrounded her, while Minato exuded a killer intent that was felt throughout the village. Aki was crying uncontrollably. As much as I want to do something about all of this, we still have no proof, and even if we get Hinata to make a statement, there is no way to prove she is not being influenced by the elders while making it, Minato said as the crowd quickly subsided. Even though they didn't agree with Minato's reasoning, everyone nodded their heads when he said, "For now, let's focus on the peace treaty between Konoha and Kumogakure for now." Naruto was thinking about his mother while the adults were discussing political issues. He mentioned that she used to treat people the same way he did lately, but that she no longer seemed to feel that way. In fact, she showed everyone love and treated them all like family, but why? Naruto was contemplating all of this when he soon discovered the Hyuga family garden, which included a koi fish pond, flower garden, zen garden, and numerous sakura trees. Since I don't know much about Japanese culture, please let me know what the actual names of these features are. He was taking in the scenery when he heard someone sobbing close to the pound. Naruto went to investigate the source of the noise and discovered the Hyuga girl from before sitting in front of the pound, sobbing into her knees with her arms wrapped around them. When Naruto noticed this, he thought, "What's she crying about? Probably told she didn't insult me enough and got her favorite toy taken away from her. What a snob. Why? Why does Ka-san hate me? I did everything the elders told me to do to make her and Oto-san proud of me, but they hate me," she was saying to herself as Naruto approached her to tell her to stop being such a whiny little brat. What did I do wrong, and why? When Naruto was able to speak again, he said to her, "Hey, are you okay?" as he stood there dumbfounded by what she was saying. After saying this, Hinata looked up from where she was sitting and saw someone standing over her. However, because of the sun, she was unable to identify the person and became afraid that they were going to kidnap her. Without giving it any further thought, she pushed Naruto into the pound. If Naruto hadn't stepped on some uneven, slick rocks and fell straight into the pound, he could have easily stopped her. Hinata was cruel to the demon boy once more, and after realizing who she had pushed into the pound, she started to fear what Ka-san would do to her. After taking a breath, Naruto felt something moving and a wired taste in his mouth. He spat it out, revealing a koi fish, to which he responded in a disgusted tone, "Live sushi without ramena disgusting." Soon after saying this, Naruto heard someone laughing at what he had done. Naruto turned to see the Hyuga girl was the source of the laughter. Naruto frowned at her and asked, "What's so funny?" Hinata continued to laugh and said, "You said raw fish without ramen." Shortly after, Naruto started laughing too. Soon after, drenched from head to toe, Naruto emerged from the water and started shaking the water off him like a dog, which made Hinata laugh even harder at his actions as he held her ribs in agony. After Naruto had stopped trembling and dried his tail, he turned to face Hinata, who appeared to be laughing so hard that she was hyperventilating. Naruto had to admit that it was kind of nice to make this human girl laugh. After she stopped laughing at Naruto, Hinata started to wipe away her tears, but she soon looked at Naruto's shirt and started laughing even harder. Naruto was perplexed and questioned, "What's so funny this time?" When Hinata was unable to make out the words, she pointed to his shirt and exclaimed, laughing, "Shirt ha 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 fish." When Naruto heard this, he looked down and saw a fish's tail fin protruding from his shirt. He reached for it, pulled it out, and brought it to his face, where the fish repeatedly slapped him from left to right. Hinata's ribs almost exploded with laughter at this point, and the laughter only got worse when the fish Naruto was holding fell out of his grasp and into his mouth, causing Naruto to yell into the air once more, "I hate sushi." Hinata kept staring at the blonde Hanyu, who was behaving like a child, until she remembered that both he and she were children, but it was still amusing. After Naruto stopped cursing the sky, he turned to face the Hyuga girl and told her to stop making fun of him. However, as he watched her smile and laugh, he felt good about making her laugh, and he soon started laughing too. The two children soon stopped laughing and started to relax, but Naruto was the first to notice Hinata's cheek bruise and inquire, "Hey Hyuga girl, what happened to your face?" Remembering the bruise, Hinata covered it with her hand and turned away from him, saying, "Don't look at me." Unable to understand why she was acting in this manner, Naruto asked her, "Hey, what's wrong? Turn around and explain the situation to me." Hinata simply refused to turn around and remained motionless, but Naruto soon heard her sobbing once more. Before he could understand what Hinata was saying through her tears, Naruto was shocked and wondered what exactly he had done. Don't L. Look at M. May I'm ugly. Before forcing her to turn around and face him, Naruto asked himself, why would she say that there's nothing wrong with her? Because he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Before he could say, "Why the hell would you think something like that?" Naruto yelled at Hinata, who was terrified of why he would be doing this. Not understanding why he was upset with her, Hinata expressed her feelings to him, saying, I think that I'm ugly is because it's true that my perfect Hyuga skin it ruined and now I'm ugly Ka.san and Odo.san will hate because I'm not perfect like the elders said so. When Naruto heard something he couldn't believe, he told Hinata, that is by far the stupidest thing I have ever heard of in my life. Every bird in the vicinity took off at this point, and Hinata collapsed back onto the ground, staring at Naruto in terror. Hinata was about to respond, but she was cut off when Naruto asked, do you really think that your family will care whether or not you are perfect? His eyes were starting to get red, and his voice was deeper than usual. No, they wouldn't care. The only thing they care about is you being happy and growing up to be a good person. That's what would make them proud. Thinking about what Naruto had said, Hinata wondered about everything the elders had told her that would make her parents proud. However, after hearing her mother's earlier remarks, she realized that perhaps they were incorrect. Then, recalling how she had been acting and treating everyone, she realized why her mother was so upset. It all made sense now, and although she felt guilty about her actions and the way she treated others, she knew that what she had done was wrong because of this boy, whose name she had not even learned. When Hinata asked, what's your name? Naruto simply gave her a wired look and replied, Naruto, Namikaze Naruto. My name is Hyuga Hinata, and it's nice to meet you, Hinata said with a smile. Looking at the bruise, which was still fresh and would take time to heal, Naruto returned the smile and said, hey Hinata, if you like, I could do some healing techniques that could get rid of that bruise. Naruto wanted to be friends with Hinata. When Hinata heard this, she was moved by Naruto's desire to help her and that it would help her get over her bruise. Then, she saw his fox ears and had an idea. If I let you heal my bruise, then you got to let me do something, she said, glancing at Naruto. He simply stared at her, wondering what she was planning, but Hinata grinned and said, okay, you let me heal your bruise, then you can do whatever you want afterwards, okay. In order to make the jutsu at least 10 times more powerful, Naruto put his hands on the bruise and started to pour his chakra into it. However, because he was a Hanyu, his chakra was unique. The bruise was almost healed in a few minutes, but Naruto had to concentrate on the bruise because he was still learning how to use and shape chakra. As a result, he didn't hear footsteps behind him until, what are you doing, Naruto-kun? Naruto became extremely rigid upon hearing this, as evidenced by the hair on his tail standing straight up. When he and Hinata turned to face the source of the voice, they saw Kyuubi, Minato, Hashi, and Aki standing there, all of them wearing inquisitive expressions. In the hopes that they wouldn't make a big deal out of this, Naruto turned to his parents and grinned. However, he avoided making eye contact because he thought her parents would despise her, but if she looked, she would see how worried they are about her at the moment. With one of her many questions in mind, Kyuubi turned to face her son and said, Naruto-kun, why are your clothes wet and why is there a fish in your shirt? As Naruto reached for it and threw it into the lake, he heard laughter and noticed Hinata laughing once more. Naruto looked down and saw that there was, in fact, another fish in his shirt that had somehow remained hidden this time. When Naruto turned to face her, he said, you knew that was there the whole time, didn't you? Hinata grinned and said, yep. Naruto became enraged and asked, well, why didn't you say anything? Hinata simply pretended to be innocent and said, you never asked. Everyone started laughing when they heard this, with the exception of Naruto, who simply glared at Hinata and said, oh, just shut up. Hinata took offense and responded, you shut up. Naruto responded, no, you shut up, to which Hinata responded, no, you shut up. This went on for at least 5 minutes. When Hinata yelled at Naruto, why don't you make me shut up then? The adults became irritated and were about to end it. Naruto simply growled at her and said, all right, I will. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed the sides of Hinata's face and pressed his lips to hers. For the young Hyuga, time seemed to have stopped at that point. She was initially taken aback by Naruto's actions, but she soon started to truly enjoy them, and the only thought she could think was, Maya firsta kissa Naruto-kun. Naruto eventually retreated and smirked arrogantly, saying, there that got you to shut up. All of the adults were in shock after that. Some wanted blood, Hashi, some wanted to congratulate, Minato, and some wanted to jump with joy at the newest couple, Kyuubi and Aki. Hinata, on the other hand, just stood there, blushing, while Naruto was fully aware of what he had done. After congratulating himself on his victory, Naruto noticed that Hinata was red in the face. He became concerned and asked her, Hinata, are you okay? He felt her forehead to check for fever, but as soon as he did, Hinata's redness intensified. While far, far away in a galaxy somewhere in space, on a planet, two green aliens with large black eyes were observing the sky when they noticed something red. One of them asked the other, "What do you think that light is?" And the other replied, "Probably a Hyuga." Returning to Earth, Hinata passed out immediately after Naruto touched her, which made Naruto panic and turn to face everyone, asking, "What happened? Is she okay? Why are you all staring at me like that?" Kyuubi stepped forward, looked at her son, and said, "Naruto no baka, do you realize what you just did?" As everyone's perspiration began to drip. After responding with a bewildered expression, "What did I do? All I did was kia ssa Hinata," Naruto quickly passed out. Hashi wanted to kill Naruto in this sleep, but since he was his best friend's son, he took it out on Minato, saying, "Minato, you better give me a good reason not to kill you." The women then laughed. Because his son had kissed his best friend's daughter, Minato started to perspire as he tried to come up with a good reason why his best friend shouldn't kill him. He looked to his wife and maid for support after failing to think of a good reason, but all he received was a frowning. "Your son your problem, besides it's your fault anyway for letting him be around, that pathetic excuse of an arrow. OG.san of his." As Minato continued to think, "Boys will be boys," Hashi simply responded, "Not good enough," and Minato was quickly defeated by the Hyuga Juken. After a while, Hinata started to wake up and opened her eyes to see her mother smiling over her. This made Hinata fear that her mother would hit her again, but she saw that her mother was grinning at her without showing any signs of malice. When Aki looked down at her daughter, she noticed that the innocent expression she had assumed had vanished was still there. She was relieved that the elders had not done this, and she thought perhaps Hinata would be okay. Aki smiled at her daughter. When Hinata saw her mother smile, she was relieved that she wasn't upset with her and that she was content, so she returned the smile. "Hinata-chan, we need to talk about a few things like Naruto being all wet, why he was using a healing jutsu on you, and let's not forget the little kiss you two had," Aki said with a serious expression on her face after all of that. Hinata blushed and avoided eye contact upon hearing this. Aki looked down at what Hinata had done after her mother had abused her, but Hinata persisted in telling him about it, pushing him into the lake and stating that she needed to change. Everyone was shocked to learn that Naruto, who was extremely intelligent for his age, would say such things. Everyone soon turned to see Naruto waking up and moving his tails. Hinata approached him and knelt beside him to check on him. Soon afterward, Naruto opened his eyes and noticed a face staring at him, not just any face, but a very attractive Oniya, and his face flushed slightly. When Hinata saw that Naruto was blushing and staring at her while he was doing it, she blushed as well, and everyone grinned. When Kyuubi realized that the meeting with Kumogakure was almost ready to start, he turned to face Naruto and grinned malevolently. "Okay, Naruto, if you're done flirting with Hinata," Kyuubi said, causing Naruto to flush. "But we need to get you into some new clothes, and Hinata, no, you can't come and watch Naruto change." Hinata became equally red at this point, and Kyuubi simply continued to laugh until Naruto opened his mouth and uttered the incorrect words to her. "Ka.san you hentai." Time seemed to have stopped until a massive chakra explosion swept through the area, causing Kyuubi to yell, "Naruto, you dead." Minato looked down at his son in terror and yelled, "Naruto, run." After realizing what he had done, Naruto ducked under his mother's claws and saw that she was in what is known as the primal mode of demons, where all demons will attack anything they want. At the moment, this was a furious mother and a foul-mouthed son. Everyone else was just turning their heads left and right to watch what was happening while Naruto was running around the compound on all fours with his mother on him. However, it ended quickly when Kyuubi stopped pursuing Naruto to the pound, but Naruto continued to run until he realized his mother had, for some reason, stopped. "Naruto.kun, how are you walking on water without using any chakra?" Kyuubi yelled as she gave her son a menacing smile. When Naruto heard this, he didn't understand what she was talking about until he looked down and saw that, as his mother had described, he was standing atop the pound. Shortly after that, he fell through the water once more. "How did your son walk on water without using chakra?" Hashi asked Minato after he had done that. "How should I know how he does stuff like that? Hell, I can't even figure out where he puts 25 bowls away." Minato simply shrugged his shoulders and looked at him. "Like you don't already know, you ramen freak," Minato thought as he perspired. To Hinata's dismay, Naruto emerged from the lake once more and spat out some water, but this time there were no fish. Everyone turned to see Kyuubi holding a shovel after Kyuubi declared, "Can do," after Naruto had emerged fully from the water and said, in a tone of annoyance, "The next time I say let's go swimming, hit me with a shovel." Kyuubi. Where did you get that shovel?" Minato asked, twitching as he glanced at his wife. Kyuubi simply looked at him, said, "I don't know," and threw the shovel behind her, forgetting her demonic strength. In the hot springs while a white-haired pervert was doing his research at the nearby bathhouse, a shovel suddenly appeared out of the sky and struck him in the face, causing him to scream in agony. His cover was also blown because the women had heard him and had come out to see what was happening. After they discovered the white-haired pervert, many of them released killer intent, and one of them said, "Jiraiya, you just wait until Tsunade hears about this. Can't we talk about this?" Jiraiya begged, turning pale white at this point, but it was unsuccessful, and a loud scream reverberated throughout the village. Returning to the compound after hearing this, everyone turned to look around, and Aki questioned, "What was that?" "Not a clue, but I get this good feeling every time a hentai gets beaten to within an inch of his life," Kyuubi retorted. Everyone simply dismissed that idea after hearing it, so Minato turned to Naruto and said, "Naruto, please change for the meeting and get moving." Naruto answered, "Hi, Oto-san." After remembering something while out for a walk with his father, Naruto returned to Hinata and said, "I almost forgot to finish this." He then started to channel healing chakra into his hands and completed healing her cheeks. "There, good as new if not prettier," was his response after he grinned at his creations and saw how much better she looked. Hinata blushed once more at this, and if she continues, she will be known as Hinata the Red Hyuga. He then grinned at Naruto. "Hey Hinata, what would you have wanted to do if I had healed your bruise?" Naruto remembered the other part of the deal at this point. "Nothing, forget it," Hinata said. When Naruto said, "Come on Hinata, whatever it is, just do it," Hinata became anxious and said, "Well yeah." But she continued to stare at Naruto's fox ears and simply jumped at them and started massaging them. He never allowed anyone to touch his ears because he was embarrassed by what she was doing. Despite this, Naruto didn't startle her. All he could think was, Hinata-chan's hands are really soft. After finishing, Hinata was about to apologize when she saw Naruto leaving, but not before turning around and saying, "See you later, Hinata-chan." Hinata's mind momentarily stopped, and she responded, "He called me Chan instead." The thought, "This seems a little familiar," made Kyuubi smile. Subsequently, the members of Kumogakure no Sato appeared, including one Jonin, at least one Chunin, and a few civilians. One of them was a woman with a great figure, blonde hair, and what some would call purple cat eyes. Of course, she also had two tails, one of which was located directly above her ass. The young girl next to her, who was a few years older than Naruto, shared the same characteristics as the women except that she had 3 tails instead of 2. When the ambassadors reached the Hyuga clan, Minato welcomed them all. Naturally, everyone was a little taken aback that a demon cat would represent a nation, but they all did the same. After greeting every human, Minato approached the demon, who bowed, "Hello, Hokage. Sama. My name is Nibi no Nekomata, and I totally understand if you feel a little threatened by me because I'm a demon." Nibi appeared perplexed until Minato moved his shirt to reveal the mark Kyuubi had left on him the night they made love, after which Minato simply grinned and said, "It's not a big deal, Nibi-sama." Nibi was stunned to see that she was the only demon willing to sleep with a human, in contrast to other demons who only want to have fun. But who could he have mated with? Nibi asked herself. After a brief moment of contemplation, she said, "Will you hurry up, Naruto? You look fine." Hearing Kyuubi, she turned to face the door from which the noise was coming and saw it open, revealing Kyuubi. When Kyuubi heard her name, she turned to see her close friend, Nibi-chan. Although it was true that they hadn't seen each other in years, the two rushed at each other and gave each other hugs, which was not the point. "How have you been all this time?" Kyuubi asked her after they had parted ways, and they both grinned. "Well, I met a good man who became a secretary for the Raikage had a kitten, and here I am in you," Nibi said. With a smile on her face, Kyuubi said, "Kind of the same, picked a fight with Yamada no Orochi, got messed up, met my mate and then had a kit." Kyuubi merely twitched. "You didn't have to put it like that." Nibi, unable to believe what she was hearing, said, "You had a child. Miss men are below the bottom of my feet but in truth ran away whenever they got real close." Soon after, Kyuubi noticed a young girl hiding behind Nibi. "And what is your name, little kit?" Kyuubi asked, and the child gave him a scared look before responding. "My name is Yugito Kyuubi. Sama." "Yugito-chan, why don't you go and play with my kid over there? He's the one flirting with the Hyuga heiress." Kyuubi grinned at the shy girl, who seemed to be about the same age as her mother. Yugito looked perplexed by Kyuubi's remarks and turned to face her mother, who gave her a nod of approval before she hurried off to befriend Hinata and Naruto. When Kyuubi was out of sight, Nibi turned to face her gravely and remarked, "We need to talk. Get the head of the Hyuga clan and your maid. We need to go over something." Yugito said hello to Naruto and Hinata while the adults were chatting. She was worried that they wouldn't like her because she was a half demon or just a three-tailed demon, but she was mistaken. They liked her right away. Although the meeting took longer than anticipated, the three children quickly fell asleep in Hinata's bedroom, oblivious to the men who had broken into the same room. The evening was filled with adult conversation and children's laughter. If one of the men hadn't stepped on a loose floorboard, waking up two half-demons who saw Hinata in a bag being abducted by someone, they would have attacked. The men had already picked her up, tied her up, and gagged her. Given their lack of taijutsu knowledge, Naruto and Yugito relied solely on their demonic instincts, which proved sufficient to defeat two kidnappers. The two Hanyu children were too strong for the kidnappers, even if they had some prior shinobi training. When the last kidnapper was finished and his left eye was severed, Naruto rushed to check on Hinata. Using his claws, he opened the bag to find a sobbing Hinata leaping out at him. Naruto simply clung to her, assuring her that everything would be fine and that he would always be there to keep her safe. The parents of all the children arrived after the guards arrived and discovered Hinata's room in a bloody mess. The Hyuga family was relieved that their daughter was safe, the Namikaze were proud that their son had protected Hinata, and Nibi was also pleased that her daughter had protected her friends. Nibi took care of the Junin after examining the dead but alive kidnappers, who were the Chunin from Cloud. She informed everyone that the Junin intended to organize a rebellion against the Raikage once they had the Hyuga eyes on their side. After a while, Nibi explained that the Junin was a prime suspect but that there was no proof as of yet. The Junin was going to kidnap her for the purpose of studying her eyes or a breeding factory. After a peace treaty was negotiated and Nibi took over negotiations for her village, she and her daughter bid their friends farewell and started to head home. As Hinata and Naruto were shouting goodbye as they were leaving, Kyuubi noticed that they were holding hands. The thought of how adorable they could be together in the future made her smile. 3 years had passed since the Cloud incident, but things had improved. With Hinata's assistance, Naruto's fear of people was gradually waning as she underwent the Elder's training without showing any concern for them. A year ago, Naruto enrolled in the academy with the expectation of learning powerful and amazing jutsu and other things. Naruto, however, assumed Hinata was more knowledgeable than what would be taught in the upcoming years. The majority of the students were listening to the teacher as she discussed the shinobi nations, including Hinata and Sakura. Others, like Naruto and a boy named Shikamaru, were either not paying attention or were simply dozing off during class, showing little interest in the difficult lessons. Shikamaru was unavoidable, but Naruto was awakened by a powerful, quick kick to the leg. When Naruto woke up from his slumber, he saw a displeased and a little frightening Hinata staring at him, along with an irate sensei. Hinata simply rolled her eyes and said, "Baka," while Naruto rubbed the back of his head and grinned foxily. Since Minato and the Raikage were both working on paperwork, Kyuubi and Nibi were together while the children were in school. Kyuubi had to meet with the repressive Cloud. Naturally, she didn't mind at all because it was Nibi, and after everything was resolved, they were able to enjoy themselves. Demons are like kids. "So Kyuubi-chan, how are things?" Kyuubi asked her old friend as they were eating lunch. "Nothing much, the village is pretty quiet and nothing much has been happening at the hospital. What about you?" Nibi simply shrugged. "Same here, just signing paperwork." Shudders. "No wonder the cages hate those evil things." Kyuubi simply laughed. "So you two haven't gone down and dirty Latelia, maybe he's loosening interest in you." Nibi continued as she took a sip of her tea, looking mischievously at Kyuubi. "So have you and your mate gotten down lately?" Kyuubi simply twitched and turned away, saying, "That's none of your business." Nibi then began to shackle as if she were having a panic attack. Nibi began to freak out upon seeing this, saying, "Kyuubi-chan, calm down. I was joking with you." With tears in her eyes, Kyuubi gazed at her and said, "But it's true, Minato-kun has been spending less and less time with me. I worried he doesn't see me as a proper mate anymore." Nibi got in her face and slapped her head forward upon hearing this. While Nibi gave her a strict, "Don't be such a baka, Kitsune. Look," Kyuubi simply stared at her in confusion. "Have you forgotten what that mark on your neck means, baka?" Nibi asked her sternly. Kyuubi then started to rub the mark on her neck, recalling the night she and Minato mated and how Naruto soon arrived, asking, "How could I be such a baka?" "Kyuubi-chan, if it makes you feel better, me and my mate haven't been intimate in a while either, so don't get your tails in a knot." Kyuubi simply nodded her head, not particularly enjoying the whole tails in an odd joke that happened to her once and it hurt like hell. Nibby tried to help a little more when she saw the calm return to her friend's eyes. After settling everything, Nibby started talking seriously and ordered more sushi. At this, one could swear they could hear a pin drop. "Kyuubi, what have you heard about a Shukaku lately?" Kyuubi growled, "What about the Psycho Tanuki?" Nibby appeared to be struggling to say, "Hey, that is Shukaku has a son." The cat demon simply nodded her head in agreement as Kyuubi stared at Nibby and tried to swallow the lump in her throat. "Nani, are you sure, Nibby?" Kyuubi asked. Even though they had only met Shukaku once, Nibby recalled growing up and meeting him for the first time, as well as the nightmare he caused. Kyuubi simply sat in her seat, thinking, "Shukaku, the deadliest monster I have ever met and will probably ever meet in this and any lifetime." Rewind. In the demon world, a chibi. Kyuubi and a chibi, Nibby were taking a break in a spacious clearing while they learned how to control their demon chakra. While Nibby was admiring the kitsune's tails, Kyuubi was merely gazing at the clouds. "That's easy for you to say, Kyuubi, you have 9 beautiful tails while I have barely one," Nibby said with a smile while petting the tails. "Kyuubi-chan, your tails are so soft and cute." Kyuubi gave her a frustrated look and said, "Nibby-chan, how many times do I have to tell you to quit playing with my tails and play with your own for a while, would ya?" As Nibby pouted. Nibby pouted and said, "Sigh, can we talk about something else, Nibby-chan?" At first, Nibby did nothing, but then she turned around and asked, "Okay, what do you think of Gobi?" Kyuubi rolled her eyes and said, "He's just a horny mutt like all boys are, why?" Nibby simply dropped her perspiration, saying, "That's your reply for everything when it comes to boys. You know people are going to start thinking you're lesbian or something." Kyuubi blushed, and Nibby said, "So it is true. I bet you keep a bunch of Yuri manga hidden in your room somewhere, don't you?" When Kyuubi had calmed down and Nibby was rubbing her bump and sobbing a little, Kyuubi simply looked at her angrily and said, "Well, that's what you get for casting doubt on my sexuality." Nibby simply glared at her and said, "Kyuubi-chan, it was just a joke, you didn't have to hit so hard, you big meanie." After Kyuubi had calmed down, she turned to face Nibby and asked, "Why were you asking whether I like the mutt or not?" Nibby simply looked at her best friend and said, "Well, you see." At this point, Kyuubi was a little more shocked and was actually a little afraid that she and Nibby would grow apart. She heard her say, "So tell me, is Thesa boy a cat demon like you or what?" Nibby looked a little scared. "He's not a demon, he's a human." Kyuubi simply stared at her, and her words, "Nani, a human," could be heard over 3 countries. "Hello, a human. Why don't you tell the rest of the demon world, why don't cha?" Nibby was flushed bright red. Kyuubi simply stared at her, perplexed. "Why the hell would you like a human in that way, it's so weird." Nibby simply stared at Kyuubi, who replied, "I do know wella, maybe a little a bit." At this point, Nibby blushed again and smiled, saying, "His name is Daichi. His family are farmers, but they're good people. He's really built for his age and is very kind, and his hands there are so soft when he was rubbing my ears." As she described her encounter with Daichi, Kyuubi squealed about his hands and thought, "Girly," and "creepy." The two continued to argue, but eventually stopped due to Nibby's stubbornness, so she agreed. However, the two were unaware that someone else was listening to someone who would cause a lot of people to suffer. Like everyone else, this individual was a demon, but he was older than Kyuubi and Nibby. He was Shukaku, a fully grown demon, but because of his actions, he was only allowed to have 1 full tail. Shukaku was weak but still extremely lethal as a result. As Nibby continued to talk about her crush on humans, Shukaku came up to them. As Nibby continued talking about the human, Kyuubi noticed something in the air that smelled strongly of blood and sand. Kyuubi turned at this point and saw a man behind him with 1 tail and torn monk rubs covered in tattoos. When Nibby finally noticed the strong smell of blood and sand emanating from him, she started to shake with fear and did everything she could to avoid puking in that very moment. Kyuubi wasn't doing much better either. She was refusing to back down, but the blood odor was making her sick. Shukaku bowed to the two, staring at them with a sick smile and a maddening expression in his eyes. "Greetings to you too," the 2 demons said, merely glancing at him while bowing in deference to the elder. "Is there anything we could help you with, Shukaku-sama?" Kyuubi glared at the demon. Kyuubi continued to glare at the demon, saying, "Just tell us what you want and leave us alone." Shukaku simply looked at her and laughed maniacally, saying, "Well, aren't you a little smart-mouth kitsune bitch?" Kyuubi simply stared at the sand demon with hatred in her eyes. The sand demon simply looked at Nibby and said, I was listening to your talk of being with a human and it caught my interest. Nibi looked concerned as he went on. You see, I believe that humans are the key to unlocking true and ultimate power of the world. Nibi tried to stop them because she could tell that this would turn into a fight. Both demons were stunned to learn that an older demon would consider human and demon coexistence to be beneficial. Nibi was pleased that this demon believed that being with a human was beneficial and that she and Daichi might have hope. Kyuubi, however, was a little less convinced by the raccoon's claims about ultimate power. Could you explain to us what humans have to do with gaining more power? Kyuubi asked, keeping her gaze fixed on Shukaku. With a sickening smile, Shukaku looked and started to explain. There is a difference in power between us and humans. We demons are naturally stronger in strength, but that will only get us so far in a battle against a more powerful opponent due to the fact we don't have the will to continue most the time. But humans on the other hand, even though they are nowhere near as strong as us, can enter a battle with no chance of victory but have the spirit to keep on fighting, and that grants them victory. Seeing the logic that this nut job could somehow generate, Kyuubi and Nibi turned to face Shukaku. When he saw that the two agreed with his small theory, he went on. So if demons have more strength and humans have a better will to survive, then the only logical thing to do is to use humans to help create better demons. The two female demons exchanged glances, not quite understanding what Shukaku was trying to say. Before, the reason humans are needed is to create the most powerful weapons a demon could ask for a Hanyu. Shukaku simply stood there for a moment. The two female demons started to feel uneasy when they heard all of this because Shukaku was discussing the use of them as weapons, which was something that was frequently despised in the demon community. Nibi was a little disgusted to learn that, despite being viewed as the lowest thing in society, Hanyu were still alive. Though she wasn't as fond of people as Nibi, Kyuubi had a slightly different perspective and still didn't think they were being used as factories to make weapons. With a deranged smile, Shukaku gazed at the two and said to Nibi, "So little kitten, how about you come and join me? With you could have your pathetic human for breeding and have Hanyu as your weapons?" Nibi gasped, and Kyuubi turned pale and turned to face Shukaku, saying, "You sick fuck." Shukaku showed no emotion, indicating that he didn't care. Shukaku simply looked at her and said, "I fail to see the problem with that. Humans are nothing but insects that sometimes have a good use, but it's rare." Kyuubi simply glared at him with murderous intent, saying, "You're talking about using humans like there's some kind of breeding stock and using children as weapons." Nibi started to worry about where this might go as the two demons were glaring at each other. Although Nibi wanted to agree with Shukaku if it allowed her to be with Daichi, it wasn't right to turn children into weapons. Even if they were Hanyu, they were still human. Shukaku was getting irritated as Kyuubi continued to glare at him, and he struggled to restrain his bloodlust. Nibi nearly went to him at least until he said, "As long as you produce and give me the Hanyu children, all will work." Nibi just gasped at this. He was trying to wrap things up before he lost it. "Little cat demon, I'll make this clear. Come with me and you'll the human you crave for." Shukaku lost and shot an arm of sand, knocking Kyuubi back after a few dozen attempts. Kyuubi lost it at this point, saying, "Fuck you, just leave us alone, you sick dickless fuck." "Kyuubi!" Nibi yelled as she saw her friend hurtled and sent into the woods, forgetting about the monster in front of her, that is, until she sensed his bloodlust and turned to confront him. "Now little kitten, come with me and give me the weapons that I need," was the Tanuki's golden eyes as Nibi turned to face him and grabbed her. "No." Nibi slapped his hand away, saying, "Stay away from me, you damn monster." Nibi heard this and turned to face Shukaku, who was grinning lecherously, saying, "If you don't come willingly, I'll make sure that fox bitch it is put to good use at what the humans call the red light district. Got it?" Shukaku became enraged and grabbed her again, this time by the throat. "You little whore, you are going to do as I say whether you like it or not, and if you don't listen I can't promise the life of the fox bitch." Nibi was terrified upon hearing this and realized that she was helpless and weak. As she shed a tear, the only thought that crossed her mind was, Kyuubi-chan. Foxfire suddenly appeared as a blue flame that struck Shukaku squarely in the eyes, blinding him and simultaneously destroying them. Shukaku released Nibi and held his eyes while he screamed in agony. Unable to understand what was happening, Nibi turned to see Kyuubi standing there, bleeding and clutching her ribs, where the flame had come from. She appeared to be in pain and struggling to stand. Nibi rushed to her friend to assess the extent of the damage. Although she knew very little about the medical arts, she looked at her friend to see if there was anything she could do to help. However, they overlooked the sand forming Shukaku's eye sockets and mimicking his eyes while she was examining Kyuubi. After catching a glimpse of his actions, Kyuubi used her remaining strength to create a hand seal, and she and Nibi vanished using a fire teleportation technique. home of the Kitsune clan. In the hopes of finding some sort of amusement, two Kitsune were standing in front of the estate board when they noticed a bright blue flame appear. Upon closer examination of the flame, two figures emerged, one of which was identified as Nibi, a frequent visitor to the estate. Nibi held up the other, a bloodied and bruised Kyuubi, who uttered the words, "Ita worked," before fainting. A few hours later, when Kyuubi woke up in her room and saw her parents and Nibi near her bed, she said, hi," to everyone in passing. The words, "Hiya, that's all you have to say after we find you half dead from blood loss, Kyuubi. Chan, do you even realize how close to dying you were inappropriate because Kyuubi's mother was freaking out on her. Kyuubi's mother was crying as she said these things. Ka-san, please don't cry. I'm sorry for being hurt, but it's not my fault that me and Nibi were attacked." Kyuubi's mother looked at her in confusion, asking, "Attacked by whom?" "Some crazy baka named Shukaku." Both parents froze at the sound of this, but Kyuubi's father managed to regain his voice and ask, "Dita Uasaya Shukaku?" Kyuubi gazed at her father, whose eyes and voice had never been so terrified. "Hello." Shukaku was this wired-looking demon with a monk's robe, one tail, tattoos, and used sand for his attacks, Kyuubi said in response to her father's question, looking worried and able to see, "Audison, who is this guy anyway?" While Kyuubi and Nibi waited for a response, Kyuubi's father sat on the bed and started massaging his temples. "Shukaku is a very old demon but powerful even as a one-tail," Kyuubi's father said, taking a deep breath. "The reason he has just one tail on him is because he was thought to have an uncountable bloodlust and was obviously insane, but you probably already knew that." Kyuubi nodded her head in agreement. Kyuubi's father continued, "Shukaku's insane and somewhat obsessive attraction to humans, especially females, was the worst thing that was said about him. He frequently claimed that females would give him the greatest of Hanyu's weapons." When Kyuubi heard this, he wasn't shocked because Shukaku had been discussing it with the two all along. Observing the unsurprised expressions on the faces of both kids, Kyuubi's father questioned, "What exactly did he want with you two anyway?" Nibi said, "He wanted me." Kyuubi's parents were perplexed, wondering why Shukaku would want Nibi since they knew he only wanted humans. Then it dawned on them, "Nibi-chan, have you been spending times with a human?" Nibi simply nodded her head. "We will have to tell your family about this, Nibi-chan." Nibi looked down in concern, but she also reassured her friend, "Nibi-chan, if this guy is important to you then that's all that matter. I won't judge you or this human until I at least meet him, okay?" When the two friends were conversing, Kyuubi's mother interrupted, saying, "Well, it seems we need to have a little talk about boys." Returning to the clearing, Shukaku, whose eyes were almost healed, exclaimed aloud, "I will kill that fucking fox, I swear it. All I need is that village in the desert to help." Hours after the two demons had fled. Flashback end. With a hint of disgust in her voice, Kyuubi asked Nibi, "So what do you know about Issa-san?" as she gazed down in silence at the memory that had just flashed through her head. Nibi was simply staring at her. "From what I've heard, he is a boy with red hair with green eyes and black rings around his eyes, but that may be due to insomnia since he has been reported to be afraid to sleep." When Kyuubi heard this, she became perplexed, but Nibi clarified that, "As you know, the daimyo of wind has been putting more money into leaf than sand and this has resulted in cutbacks." Kyuubi nodded, knowing full well that, so when Shukaku came to the village telling them his ways of giving them true power, the current Kazekage gave in without a second thought. Kyuubi shook her head, having met the Kazekage a few times and knowing him to be a conceited, power-hungry, selfish, sexiest, backstabbing, and jerk. Anyway, Shukaku explained his ideas of Hanyu's and even agreed to seal himself with the children to make them stronger. Kyuubi didn't like where this was going, so Nibi broke her out of her tirade. At first they tried two humans, one adult who didn't do much but showed the side effects of the sealing. He didn't live for very long, she said. Their next attempt involved a child who performed better and was able to use Shukaku's power, but he was ultimately driven insane by sleep deprivation because Shukaku would eat their souls. The boy attempted suicide, but was unsuccessful. Shukaku was removed, and the child bit his wrist and died. This was the main topic of the conversation. After the child died, people refused to help with the project even if they were ordered, but they all refused. Kyuubi wanted to go full demon and destroy the Sand Village, but she knew she couldn't do that. So after they believed they had all the data needed, they decided that it was time to make a Hanyu. So that Shukaku could forcefully impregnate his wife, which he did more than once. The Kazekage had her tied down in order to obtain what they needed. Nibi ordered some sake for her and Kyuubi after the two demons took some time to process the information and waited for the nausea to subside. Once it was confirmed that the woman was pregnant, they placed Shukaku into the unborn child. "So what else can you tell me about the boy?" I asked after drinking a few dozen bottles of Kyuubi. Kyuubi looked perplexed. "Gaara?" Nibi replied. "Well, the boy's mother did not survive after the boy was born. Her body turned to sand and she passed away, but not before naming the boy that. Gaara means demon who loves himself. He has two tails and the same kind of ears. He can use sand attacks, and he is shielded by a wall of sand as well." Knowing that the boy was already this strong and could pose a serious threat in the future, Kyuubi appeared anxious. Kyuubi said, "So what do you want me to do?" There was silence until Nibi said, "Are you out of your fucking mind? I would like Naruto to meet Gaara." When they heard this, two people at the academy and Hokage Tower thought, "This is not going to end well for me." Nibi was cowering in terror behind a chair, and Kyuubi's eyes were blazing red back with the two female demons. Kyuubi was shocked to hear that Nibi never raised her voice, not even in combat. "Now Kyuubi-chan, be calm." Didn't work. "Calm? How the fuck do you expect me to stay calm when you want my son to go against Amon?" Kyuubi was interrupted. "Don't say it. Saying he is a monster without even meeting him once makes you no better than the human that attacked Naruto," Nibi said sternly to her. Kyuubi looked down in embarrassment at this. Soon after, Nibi grinned and said, "Thanks, Kyuubi-chan." Although Kyuubi appeared to be grinning, she was secretly thinking, "I'm going to regret this. Minato is going to Sunagaku soon, maybe I could go with him." Later that evening, the family was enjoying a small meal and a side of ramen for the third night in a row at the Namikaze residence. So Kyuubi was attempting to digest what her maid and son frequently referred to as the food of the gods. "So Naruto-kun, how was your first day at the academy and chew your food?" she asked her child in an attempt to get some family time. Naruto looked at his mother while he was eating ramen and followed her instructions. Minato simply laughed as he recalled all the times he dozed off in the academy, but he had to set a good example for his son by saying, "Naruto, you must understand that it is important to pay attention in class to be ready for the life of a shinobi." Kyuubi smiled at the display of her maid to her kid, but Naruto simply gave his father a stern look, saying, "I've seen your grades at the academy Oto-san, you have to right to talk." Minato rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. At this point, Minato wanted to kill whoever had given his son this information. "So you've seen those, huh?" Naruto replied. "Hi, also I've been told about how you were the dead last and wore an ugly orange jumpsuit. What were you thinking?" Kyuubi simply shook her head. "Baka." A white-haired hentai sneezed at this. Kyuubi's friend noticed her at the end of dinner and said, "Minato-kun, there is something I would like to discuss with you." Minato gave his wife a questioning look. "I know you are going to Sunagakure soon and I would like it if me and Naruto went with you." Kyuubi was about to ask, but Minato was at a loss for words. "Why would you want to go to Sunagakure and why do I have a feeling there is something you keeping from me?" Kyuubi cursed at how cunning and foolish her maid could be at times, and then she added, "Okay, there is another reason I want to go." Kyuubi spent the time discussing her encounter with Shukaku, his objectives, and what he might be doing. "You want to go where a crazy demon is and take our son with you?" Minato asked her after she was done. Kyuubi was starting to feel anxious. "Hi, but before you say anything I want you to know one thing." "What?" Minato asked. Kyuubi simply grinned and said, "Puppy eye no jutsu." Her eyes took on the expression of a dejected puppy, and her ears went flat. "Please Minato-kun," she said in a cutesy yet childlike voice. "I wonder how hard the couch is at night." Was the final blow Kyuubi used while Minato was trying his hardest to resist, and it succeeded. "All right, you and Naruto can go with me." At this point, Kyuubi simply grinned and said, "Arigato Minato-kun." Minato was thinking, note to self, make that AS class forbidden jutsu. He turned to face his mate, who was grinning, and said, "I know that I ask a lot of you, so I thought I make it up to you." She was holding an orange book, and she said, "These books actually have a good storyline in them and there are a few things I thought we could try." Minato's jaw dropped to the ground at the sight of this, but Kyuubi simply laughed, turned around, and walked to her room, swaying her hips for him. At this point, Minato grinned broadly, said, "Arigato sensei," without speaking, and hurried to his and Kyuubi's room. The morning after, Naruto and Hinata, who promised to take notes on the classes he missed, said goodbye as the Namikaze family packed for their trip to Sunagakure. After she rubbed his ears and Naruto removed his blush, they departed. The entrance to Sanagakure. When the Namikaze reached the village, they were met by a man wearing a blue outfit that resembled the Hokage's, with the wind symbol on his hat, a young girl, and a boy. You could hear the venom in the man's voice as he glared at Minato before turning to face Kyuubi and Naruto. Minato smiled at the man and said, "Greetings Kazekage Sama." The man then glared at Minato and said, "Greetings Hokage Sama." Kyuubi concluded that they detested this man after he started to glare at them, saying, "I see you have brought your wife and your child as well." "Hi, I have brought my son Naruto and my wife Kyuubi as well." "Is this a problem?" Minato asked, sensing trouble. "No, it's just a surprise, that is all." Minato simply grinned. "Well, I thought bringing Naruto to another village would be a good thing." The Kazekage said, "These are my children Temari and Kankuro." He looked at the two and said, "Show some respect." The two kids bowed to the guests. Minato and the Kazekage departed after the introduction was finished, with Kyuubi kissing him goodbye but not missing the disgust in the Kazecage's eyes. After they had left, Naruto turned to face the two kids and said, "Hey, it's good to meet you." Both siblings responded differently to this, with the girl, Temari, cowering behind her brother out of fear. As he gazed at Naruto, the boy, Kankuro, felt both fear and hatred. When Kankuro glared at the Hanyu and said, "Yeah, there is a problem. We have to put up with one filthy monster." Naruto was perplexed and asked, "Is something wrong?" Temari looked down at the ground with a hint of sadness in her eyes, and Naruto looked at the ground with tears welling up in his eyes. Kyuubi made her presence known with a large killer intent after learning that Kit was being bullied by this boy. Kankuro became aware that the boy's mother was also standing there when he sensed the killer's intent in the air. While Temari feared for her brother's life, Kankuro gazed at Kyuubi with fear for his own. "Tell me that just because my son is a Hanyu that gives you the right to judge him, or is it that because of your little brother you know everything there is to know?" Kyuubi simply stared at him sternly. Kankuro refused to make eye contact at this point because his eyes were slightly ashamed. Temari looked similar, but her expression was primarily one of melancholy. When she realized that the two were taking her words seriously, she made an effort to win over both kids by saying, "Look, one of the reasons I came here was to help your little brother." The two siblings looked at Kyuubi with hope. In actuality, their brother was still family even though they were terrified of him. Since Kyuubi could tell she had their attention, she needed to earn their trust. "Well, while we're here, why don't you show me and Naruto around your village?" Kyuubi asked, and the two nodded. She then started showing them some of their village's attractions, which they found enjoyable. The group quickly became hungry after looking through the majority of the village and made the decision to grab lunch. The only nearby establishment was a ramen stand, which was unfortunate for Kyuubi anyhow. Temari and Kankuro paid for the meal and departed shortly after they were done, having overcome their curiosity about how the blonde Hanyu managed to fit 25 bowls of ramen. Kyuubi glared at the chief as they were leaving, making sure she would exact revenge on Kami for inventing ramen. Kami wondered what was causing the dark, malevolent chill that ran up and down her spine in the heavens. As the group explored the remainder of the village, they learned about its history and browsed some of the stores to find items that would be suitable presents. The glass shops in the village's civilian area had the majority of the best items. A glass phoenix was discovered by Naruto in one of the stores. When Naruto showed it to his mother, he told her that Hinata-chan would appreciate it as a present when she returned home. When Kyuubi responded, his little girlfriend back home, the two siblings appeared perplexed. Naruto then became red, saying, S. She's not my girlfriend Ka-san. Kyuubi simply grinned and said, "But Naruto-kun, didn't you kiss her on the lips 3 years ago?" At this point, Naruto's face was as red as his mother's hair, and Temari burst out laughing. They soon arrived at the village park after the group had finished their sightseeing and Naruto's face had stopped being so red. As Naruto surveyed the area, he noticed both parallels and differences between the sand park and the one back home. Although there were a few trees and some equipment, the majority of the terrain was composed of sand. As Naruto looked around, he noticed children playing what appeared to be a soccer match. However, Naruto's attention was drawn to something else. He turned to face the swings and saw that someone was sitting there by themselves. When Naruto looked more closely, he saw a slightly older boy with green eyes and red hair who was holding a teddy bear and had rings around his eyes. In addition, Naruto saw that he was a Hanyu, just like him and Yugito, with 2 tails behind him and 2 ears on top of his head that resembled his own. However, this Hanyu was not like him or Yugito. In his eyes, Naruto saw only loneliness and emptiness. Naruto was about to approach the boy when he heard a sound from the other kids. He turned to see that everyone was staring up at the tree, where their ball was stoking. The ball soon started to fly off the tree with sand underneath, right to the red-haired Hanyu, as they were talking about how to get it down. When Naruto saw this, all he could think of was, cool. The red-haired Hanyu looked at the kids and held out the ball, saying, here, to the other kids in a kind voice. But instead of showing gratitude, the children began to say things like, it's him, that's Gaara, and the spawn of the demon. One child yelled, run before it kills us all, as the others attempted to flee. The boy, Gaara, reached for them and pleaded with them to return as they were doing this. The sand surrounding him began to grab the other kids as he did that, drawing them in his direction. All but one girl, who was still being dragged to Gaara, was able to escape, and as soon as she got close enough, more sand started to shoot out at her. When the flame had died down, Kyuubi was still standing unharmed. Kitsune barrier was a bright blue barrier that stood between the girl and the sand, almost in her direction. As Gaara stood there staring at the Kyuubi, he trembled with fear as she approached him. At the same time, the child who had been trapped in the sand fled for her life. Gaara attempted to use the sand, but it stopped listening. Helpless, he just collapsed backward onto the ground, staring at Kyuubi in fear that she would murder him. Stop, was heard as Gaara opened his eyes to see someone in front of him blocking Kyuubi. The person had blonde hair and 4 pigtails and tears in her eyes. Please you don't kill my Ototo. Gaara recognized the voice and realized it belonged to his sister Temari, who was defending him for once. While tears were streaming from his eyes, all he could say was, someone please help me. Despite Temari's entreaties, Kyuubi simply continued to move forward, passing her and continuing on in the direction of Gaara. As soon as she was in front of him, Gaara closed his eyes and stared at her crimson eyes, believing he was about to die. Gaara was anticipating an attack of some sort, but instead he experienced something entirely different at Kyuubi hugging him. For some reason, Kyuubi was crying when Gaara looked up at her. He heard her say, I'm sorry. If I had stopped him back then you wouldn't have had to suffer so long. Gaara was perplexed, but he was also intelligent for his age and was able to piece things together. He was aware that she was referring to Shukaku's Aodasan and that the Sand People were aware that he was sealed inside of him, but how did she know? He wanted to ask the demon Kitsune why she was still holding him, but first he wanted to enjoy this feeling that no one had ever given him before, not even his caretaker Yashamaru, and he liked it. After a sufficient amount of time had passed, Kyuubi released Gaara, who was merely staring at her with a mixture of confusion and joy. When Kyuubi released Gaara, she smiled at him, leaving him to question whether this was the typical behavior of a mother. Kyuubi simply grinned at the boy, who seemed perplexed by her behavior but also enjoyed it. When the allotted time had elapsed, Kyuubi grinned at Gaara and awaited his inquiries. Who are you? Gaara asked the Kitsune, and Kyuubi smiled at the young boy. My name is Kyuubi, not Yoko, and the reason I came to the village was so that I could help you and make sure Shukaku could never hurt you ever again. Gaara searched for any indication that Kyuubi was lying, but all she could see was a strange warmth in her eyes. Gaara looked at the fox boy who was simply grinning and waving at him, and for some reason, he knew he could trust this fox woman. Could you really help me? Kyuubi asked, grinning again. Of course, I would also like it if you became friends with my son. When Gaara noticed this, she waved back to Naruto. The two boys would simply stare at each other without moving or even blinking once they were in front of each other. Then, for some reason, the two began to snap at each other and glare at one another while also growling and flashing their fangs. Shortly afterward, they halted, extended their hands, and trembled. Both of them grinned and said, Nice to meet you. I'm Namikaze Naruto, and I'm Sabaku no Gaara. Both Temari and Kankuro viewed the scene with similar thoughts, but Kankuro exclaimed, What the fuck was that about? Temari then slapped her younger brother, telling him not to swear in front of women. Kankuro simply glared at his sister, saying, Where do I see no, before getting punched on top of his head and beneath the sand. Kyuubi. Sama, could you please explain why my Ototo and Naruto were doing that? Temari asked politely after venting her anger on her sibling. Kyuubi smiled and said, It's pretty normal for male demons, especially little kids, to form a pack with other demons so to determine the leader they challenge one another and the winner is the leader and two are friends after that. Temari nodded her head, indicating that she understood. Kankuro, who succeeded in getting his head out of the sand, made the remark, So demons challenge one another to show who has a bigger D. But was unable to finish because his enraged sister punched him in the face. The two antics caused Kyuubi to sigh. Temari asked, So Kyuubi, Sama who won anyway. After she had once again calmed down, Kyuubi appeared unsure, saying, that's hard to tell, but it doesn't really matter as long as they're friends, everything should be fine. Tamari noticed a genuine smile of joy on the faces of the two Hanyu boys, and she was relieved that her Odoto was content for the first time in a long time. She couldn't have asked for more. After a few hours the two boys were having the time of their lives, and many hours had passed. Gaara was happy to have met the fox boy Naruto and felt genuinely alive for the first time. Although he considered Hinata to be his best friend, Naruto was happy to have made a new friend, but she wasn't what he needed. In addition to the fact that she was a girl and he was a boy, and that the two occasionally had different perspectives, she was also simply human, which wasn't always a bad thing but frequently caused discomfort. Naruto, Gaara said to his new friend after the two boys had both exhausted themselves. Would you like to have dinner with me and my Oja-san tonight? Naruto simply smiled warmly and said, let me ask my Ka-san first. Gaara nodded and grinned. While Kankuro was on the ground unconscious, covered in bumps, blood, and bruises, and with a black eye, Naruto ran to where his mother and Gaara's siblings were, where he saw his mother and Tamari chatting and enjoying each other's company. Ka-san, is it okay if I have dinner with Gaara and his Oja-san tonight? Naruto approached his mother grinning, thinking, Minato didn't say how long the meeting between the Kazekage would take tonight, so I guess it could be okay. It's okay, Naruto-kun. Naruto yelled at the top of his lungs and began to jump up and down, but he stopped abruptly. Hey Ka-san, why is Kankuro dead? Kyuubi looked over to say, dead boy, only to see Gaara jabbing him in the head with a stick. Well, Kankuro said something and made Tamari mad and well, he said nervously, looking at the boy in fear, thinking, girls can be scary. Gaara was listening to Naruto about how different the Leaf Village was, and he wasn't paying attention to where he was going when he bumped into someone. That didn't affect him, but the person was falling, so he used his sand to stop her descent and got a good look. The girl was about his age, with brown hair and black eyes. As the group left the park, they started walking through the village, ignoring what the villagers were whispering about everything. When she finally realized what was happening, she saw that she was standing directly in front of the demon of the village, as the adult called him, and she was expecting to die any moment from being crushed to death by the sand, but instead she heard the red-haired demon say, I'm sorry for bumping into you. At first, she thought it was a trick, but his eyes showed no signs of malice, and the girl thought, they're really nice to look at, blushing. Because she was suddenly red, Gaara assumed she was ill or something. Gaara just stared at her, asking, are you okay? You seem kind of red. Are you sick? While Naruto tried to figure out what was going on, Kyuubi and Gaara's two siblings simply laughed at their brother's naive antics. When the girl noticed that she was blushing, she shook it off and said, I should apologize GG Gaara, Sama. Gaara looked perplexed and said, why are you apologizing? It was my fault Matsuri, Gaara. Sama. Gaara simply smiled and said, call me Gaara, Matsuri-chan. At this point, Matsuri turned completely red, swallowed the lump in her throat, and grinned at him. After they had a brief conversation, they realized it was getting late, so they said, I should get home Gaara-kun bye, and bye Matsuri-chan. Matsuri then started to run home, thinking, I hope to see you again Gaara-kun and maybe pet those cute tails and ears of yours. Kankuro took a deep breath and said, you know he is well on his way to be the Rookie of the Year in the academy. Tamari nodded and asked, do you think we should warn him about Fan girls? Tamari simply looked as if she was thinking, nah, let him figure it out himself, and agreed. As the group continued to walk, Kankuro and Tamari waited for the two boys to become distracted and stared to whisper. She called him Kun. A man with blonde hair and a somewhat famine-like appearance greeted the group when they got to Gaara's house. Gaara simply ran up to him and said, hello Yashamaru, Sama. The man smiled and said, hello Gaara, before turning to face Naruto and asking, and who is this? Naruto simply bowed when Gaara said, this is my new friend Namikaze Naruto. Yashamaru grinned and said, it's nice to meet you, before turning to face Kyuubi and bowing as well. After greetings, everyone went their separate ways, but before Kyuubi left, she left some things with Naruto. Naruto-kun. Remember to show some manners, wash your hands before eating, and please just for me could you eat something besides ramen? Naruto simply rolled his eyes, I promise Ka-san. Kyuubi smiled, but he noticed something on his face, so he took a handkerchief, got it wet, and started rubbing his face, much to Naruto's embarrassment. Dinner went smoothly, and Gaara and Naruto talked about their day for the majority of the evening. Yashamaru didn't say much, but he kept smiling, which unnerved Naruto. As the night wore on and Naruto's parents had yet to arrive, Naruto dozed off in Gaara's room, while Gaara, who never slept, went to the roof. When Naruto woke up in the middle of the night, he looked around the room for Gaara but couldn't find him, so he followed his scent until he reached the roof, where he saw Gaara grinning while gazing at the moon. Naruto took a seat next to his friend and said, "You know, you should be sleeping, it's pretty late after all." Gaara turned to Naruto and said, "I don't need to sleep ever because I never get tired." Naruto simply said, "You're lucky," and they both smiled as they gazed at the moon, each of them thinking of something different. Naruto was thinking of someone, not something, as the white moon reminded him of his best friend, Hinata. Chan, he thought with a smile, while Gaara was thinking about how fortunate he was to have a peaceful, pure moon. Naturally, both boys would have seen the assassin behind them who threw some kunai at Gaara. However, as the kunai approached, a wall of sand rose up and blocked him. Gaara and Naruto turned to see a masked shinobi with a sand village headband on. At this point, Naruto was unsure of what was happening, but Gaara realized it was another assassin, probably sent by the Kage to murder him once more. Just as the assassin was about to attack, he was encased in sand and crushed to near death. Gaara and Naruto just stared at the man as the assassin lay on the ground, heavily bleeding from his wounds, trying to get past the overpowering blood odor in the air, but there was also something familiar about this man's scent. Gaara approached the man and took off his mask to reveal Yashamaru, gasp and faint. Following this, Yashamaru explained why he had retaliated against Gaara and how he had never loved her at all before blowing himself up, but the sand prevented both Gaara and Naruto from dying. Naruto was shocked by what had happened, and Gaara was devastated by the loss of his only love in life. He began to move the sand around his head to form the symbol for love on his forehead. Then he heard Gaara, but it didn't sound like the Gaara he knew, saying, "I am alone. No one loves me. I will live only for myself, and love only myself." As Gaara finished, he felt something touch his shoulder and was prepared to kill whoever it was, at least until he realized it was Naruto, his only friend, and Gaara started crying. Soon after, a bright light appeared with Minato and Kyuubi. "Are you boys alright?" Minato asked, and the boys nodded, indicating that they were fine. Kyuubi, however, didn't believe it and knelt down to embrace the two boys. "I'm glad you both are safe," she said, her eyes welling with tears. Shortly after, footsteps were heard leading up to the roof, and the door for the roof suddenly burst open, revealing Temari and Kankuro, who screamed, "Gaara!" and rushed over to embrace him. After they released him, Temari noticed that he might have been hurt, forgetting that the sand had shielded him. "Are you alright, Gaara?" Gaara simply stared at his sister, telling her he was fine, and she accepted that until she noticed the mark on his head. She could feel fresh tears welling up and asked, "Gaara, did you do this to yourself?" Gaara nodded, understood what she was saying, and asked, "Do you hate it?" "I don't hate it, Gaara. I really like it," she said through her tears, and the dam simply broke as the tears flowed out. Gaara turned to face Kankuro, who simply grinned and started crying as something he had never done before yet, and said, "I like it to Gaara, and they say that chicks dig scars." Later in the night, Kyuubi finally had a chance to see the seal. She had used blackmail to gain the Kage's approval to create a better seal because she was friendly with the Fire Lord, and the Wind Lord's wife had recently given birth to their first child with Kyuubi's assistance, so they were on her side. Both Kyuubi and Minato examined the seal after Gaara took off her shirt, and Minato was appalled to see that it was a three-pronged seal that was improper and incomplete with a berserker seal on it as well. After determining what was required, Minato was able to properly seal Gaara using a small amount of Kyuubi blood to strengthen the seal. The boy would initially only scream in agony, but Kyuubi held him close and massaged his back until he fainted. Everyone made the decision to sleep in a hotel after that. The following morning it was time to head back to the Leaf Village since it was now morning. Despite Kyuubi's best efforts to persuade Gaara to accompany them, he insisted that sand was his home. Following a lengthy farewell from everyone, Gaara approached Kyuubi and bowed, saying, "Arigato gozaimasu, Kyuubi sama." Kyuubi simply grinned and raised her gaze to meet Gaara's, saying, "Gaara-kun, if you like you can call my Ka-san." Gaara simply grinned, nodded, and gave her a final hug. After saying goodbye and making a commitment to keep in touch, Naruto and Gaara started to travel back home. Every member of the Namikaze family was eager to get home as they approached the Konoha gates. Chunin said, "Welcome back, Namikaze Samas," and bowed respectfully as the family reached the gates. The two nins were greeted with smiles from the family. Following that, Naruto's stomach rumbled, saying, "Well, it's time to get me some ramen." Minato glanced at him and nodded. Kyuubi also intended to take a long, soothing dip in the hot springs. These pleasant thoughts were abruptly interrupted by one of the nins. "Forgive me, Hokage. Sama, Kyuubi, Sama, and Naruto, Sama." The three of them stared at the nin in confusion, but he added, "But there seems to be a pile-up of paperwork in the hospital and Hokage office." Minato and Kyuubi recoiled in horror, while Naruto simply snickered. Naruto was shocked when Hinata actually did that. "Hinata. Sama also made very clear that you get it right away. She was quite freighting with this demand," the nin said, looking at Naruto. "Naruto. Sama, there is also the notes and mate. Up test you will have to take given us by Hinata. Sama, for the time you were gone." Office of the Hokage. Minato was standing in front of his office, sweating profusely, terrified to confront the malevolent enemy there. He was practically wishing he could take on his wife with all of his might. However, there was more evil than any demon alive in the Hokage's office, as evidenced by the paperwork that covered his desk and most of the floor. Hospital in Konoha. Outside her offices at the hospital, Kyuubi was trembling like a newborn kitten and biting her fingernails. When she opened the door to her office, she saw paperwork, and not just any paperwork, but paperwork that was at least 3 times as large as Minato's. Naruto's room at Namikaze home. When Naruto returned home as instructed, he discovered a large sealing scroll in the center of his room with the words, "Dear Naruto-kun. You better do something big to thank me for this. Your friend Hinata." Naruto grinned and thought, "Hinata-chan is so nice," before opening the scroll with some blood on it. As soon as he did, Naruto's skin and hair turned pure white in horror, as what came out of the scroll was enough paperwork that put both Minato's and Kyuubi's to shame. The Hyuga compound. The two girls heard a loud scream suddenly while Hinata was combing Hanabi's hair. When Hanabi looked perplexed, Hinata grinned and replied, "Naruto comes back and he sees how well I take notes." Hanabi scowled and said, "Poor fuzzy Nissan." After 3 days, yes, 3 days later, Naruto had finished everything, committed all of the reports to memory, and was en route to the Hyuga compound. One of the guards met him when he got to the compound and asked if he could see Hinata. After giving a nod, the guard went to fetch Hinata. While waiting for Hinata in the courtyard, Naruto reached into his pocket, produced a small package wrapped in a black bag, and grinned at it. He missed the sound of tiny footsteps as he was examining the packing, but Fuzzy Nissan hit him in the back with a tiny object and felt something dangling from his back. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh and said, "Hello, Hanabi-chan." Hanabi grinned at the boy, whom she thought was an older sibling, and immediately went to rub his tails. This made Naruto smile at the young girl he loved, even though her first words were, "Fuzzy," when she was still a baby. "Hanabi-chan, I need you to stop that. I'm here to give your sister a present," Naruto said, and Hanabi pouted a little before stopping. "So what did you get Hinata-Nissan anyway, Fuzzy Nissan?" he asked. Naruto pulled out the black bag after checking to make sure Hinata wasn't nearby. The glass phoenix Naruto had purchased in Suna was exposed when he untied it. The figure was a true work of art, and Hanabi gasped when he saw it. Hanabi grinned as Naruto wrapped the package, expressing how fortunate Hinata was to have Naruto by her side. At this point, Hanabi had another idea that would make him laugh. With an innocent mask on, Hanabi questioned, "Fuzzy Nissan, when are you going to be my Nissan by law?" "What are you talking about, Hanabi-chan?" Hanabi asked, grinning, as Naruto simply stared at her in confusion, and Hanabi could tell by the twitch in his ears. "I mean, when are you and Hinata-Nissan going to get married?" Hanabi asked. When Naruto heard this, his jaw hit the ground and he said, Married, what are you talking about?" Hanabi simply smiled and covered her evil face, saying, "Well, you love Hinata-Nissan, don't you?" Naruto then turned bright red, saying, "But you would like to be Morea, right?" Hanabi simply eyed him and said, "S. Sometimes." A loud gasp was heard, followed by a thud. Hanabi and Naruto both turned to see Hinata unconscious on the ground. Hanabi was laughing and supporting Naruto as her mouth hung open, asking, "Did you hear me?" When Hinata eventually woke up after a while, she saw the face of a certain fox boy with blonde hair. "Hello, Hinata-chan," Naruto grinned, and Hinata blushed slightly. Hello, Naruto-kun, welcome back." Naruto started telling Hinata everything about this trip to Suna as soon as she woke up. He told her about meeting Gaara and his siblings, and when he mentioned Temari, he noticed Hinata frown for some reason. When he was finished, he took out the black bag and handed it to Hinata, who opened it to reveal a crystal phoenix. She examined it and saw that the design was flawless and appeared to have the potential to come to life. With a deep flush, Hinata smiled and said, "Arigato gozaimasu Naruto-kun." "No problem, Hinata." "Chan," added Naruto, who also blushed. The two simply stared at one another without moving, speaking, or even blinking, and Hanabi became agitated. "Are you two going to kiss or what?" he asked, and the two stopped what they were doing and turned red. After the red in both Hinata's and Naruto's faces subsided, Hinata went to put the crystal in her room, and while she was gone, Naruto continued to glare at Hanabi, who was merely laughing at the two misfortunes. Naruto simply added, "Just wait until you find a boy you like, Hanabi-chan," which caused Hanabi to blush a little. Her mother, who greeted Naruto with a warm smile, followed Hinata when she returned shortly after. Naruto swallowed the lump in his throat and turned to face Hinata. Hinata-chan, I was wondering if you'd like to get some ramen with me?" Despite the fact that it wasn't a date, Naruto did his best to make it seem that way. When Hinata heard this, she blushed and turned to face her mother, who simply nodded in agreement. Hinata then grinned and she and Naruto started to leave the compound while holding hands. Hanabi yelled, "Have fun on your date," which caused the two to flush once more. They turned back to face Hanabi and yelled, "It's not a date." The two departed at this point, with Hanabi laughing and her mother glaring at her, saying, "Hanabi-chan, you shouldn't tease your niece-in like that." Hanabi simply pouted at her mother, "But it's fun." Her mother simply laughed, "I know, but still, we should just let them go at their own pace." Hanabi simply grinned, "So the betting pool is really growing, huh?" "Yep, but I do agree the sooner the two get together, the better. I want some grandchildren in the future," Aki said with a smile. "And you should be ready to help out with that as well," Aki said, making Hanabi perspire. Now, we have a certain fox boy and Hyuga enjoying what they called a non-date at Ichiraku's. Hinata was enjoying a bowl of miso while Naruto was just enjoying a bowl of chicken, beef, shrimp, chili, and turkey ramen. Ayame, the chief of the ramen bar's daughter, couldn't help but smile at how adorable the two of them looked together. While they were finishing another bowl, they heard a loud bagging sound and Touya yelling, "Get back here, you little thief." A girl with long red hair ran out of the back with a bag full of food after jumping over the counter, and Tucci's face turned red with rage. "Get back, you little thief," Touya said, and the girl simply turned around and gave him the finger, saying, "Fuck off, you goddamn fucking tosser." Touya was furious at what she had said, and then he saw Naruto sitting there and thought, "Naruto, if you catch that girl I'll give you all the ramen you can eat for 3 whole days." Touya blinked, and Naruto vanished. Touya looked at the daughter and said, "Ayame, I know that using Naruto in this way is wrong, but he is the only one who can catch that thief." Ayame left, twitching, "That's not what I mean, Baka." Touya simply looked perplexed, saying, "You gave Naruto-kun all the ramen he could eat for 3 whole days." When Touya realized his error, he started crying and asked, "What have I done?" Naruto, meanwhile, was pursuing the thief's scent, which was a combination of saltwater and forest scent, and he was getting closer when he came to a broken window in front of an abandoned shack. He looked inside and saw that the inside was dirty, the roof was full of holes, and there was only a small makeshift bed on the floor. Looking around, Naruto noticed the girl sitting in the center of the floor, eating what was left of the food she had stolen from the ramen bar. As soon as she finished the last of the food, she turned to her bag and began searching through it. Soon after, she pulled out a flute. Naruto looked at her, who looked to be 2 years older than him and had red hair that reached her shoulders. Naruto, who didn't have much of a musical ear due to his sensitive hearing that usually ruins everything, was able to finally snap out of whatever trace he was in while she was playing. She brought the flute to her lips and started playing, and after hearing just a few notes, he started to feel somehow calm and relaxed while listening to her play. He would even go so far as to call her a musical prodigy. Everything was perfect while she was playing. While Naruto was thinking, he didn't see that the girl had noticed he was there and pulled out a kunai and threw it at him and missed. Naruto was soon brought out of his thoughts when he realized that he nearly got killed. He fell on his ass. With a kunai in her hand, the girl ran out and glared at Naruto, asking, "Who the fucking hell are you?" Naruto was a little taken aback by the girl's language, but he quickly remembered why he was here. "Hey, why did you steal from the old man anyway?" The girl simply stared at him as if he were the world's most foolish person, asking, "What the fuck do you think? I was fucking hungry, so I fucking stole some food, you goddamn fucking shithead." The reason I have to fucking steal some fucking food is that I can't fucking buy it and Ia don't have ya on ya fucking appearance, the red-haired girl said, clutching her first and displaying signs of anger and sadness in her eyes. I thought that would help, but I didn't, so I looked down at the ground and avoided making eye contact, saying, I'm sorry I didn't know. Fuck you. What the hell are you fucking saying you're sorry for? My what a dirty mouth, both children said, looking up to see Kyuubi sitting on top of the roof. I just might have to wash it out with soap, they said. You don't fucking know a thing about me, asshole, so don't fucking feel sorry for all right. Kasen. Why are you here? Naruto asked his mother. Well, I heard that someone has been stealing from the local shops, so I thought I'd spare the Genin team the trouble of having to find the little thief, Kyuubi said as she smiled at her son. I also heard you went after her Naruto-kun, and I have to say I'm a little disappointed in you, the girl said, glaring at Kyuubi, who appeared perplexed. I'm not a date, Naruto said, blushed. The redhead glared at Kyuubi, who simply rolled her eyes and asked, what am I going to do with you? The girl replied, fuck you. Naruto nodded and left the girl and Kyuubi behind, saying, whatever you say, Naruto-kun, but you'd better get back to Hinata. Chan, I'll talk to our little thief. Later, in the middle of the town, we see Kyuubi making his way to the Hokage Tower while a young girl with red hair is restrained from running away by her tails. Tower of Hokage. The opening of his office door interrupted Minato's work at the tower, where he was doing his paperwork as usual and planning a trip to the Kirigakure no Sato to discuss new trading options. Behind him was his wife, with a small red-haired girl in her tails. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the girl was struggling to escape Kyuubi's tails and yelling like a sailor beneath one of Kyuubi's tails that covered her mouth. When Kyuubi finally let the girl go, she stood in front of the door to make sure she didn't run away. Kyuubi had entered the office to see her maid doing his paperwork because she had forbidden him from using Kage Bushin to do his work for him in order to prevent him from becoming lazy. Kyuubi still had the girl in her tails and covered her mouth with a tail to prevent her from making too much of a scene. When Minato finished the last of the endless paperwork, he said to his mate, hello Kyuubi-chan. Kyuubi smiled back at her mate, hello Minato-kun. We need to talk about something. Minato raised an eyebrow, saw the girl again, and said, Kyuubi-chan, if you wanted more children all you had to do was ask and I would be more than happy to help or at least consider adoption. The red-haired girl looked at the two with a glimmer of hope, but Kyuubi blushed when he said, Minato-kun, I didn't bring this girl for adoption. Minato-kun, have you been receiving complaints from certain food stands regarding a small red-haired thief stealing food lately? Kyuubi asked, returning her attention to her friend. Minato nodded. This thief with the red hair had given him more paperwork than usual. After noticing the girl's hair color, Minato yelled and leapt for her, but Kyuubi grabbed him by the back of his shirt and rolled her eyes, saying, Baka. Kyuubi finally released Minato after he had finished attempting to grab the girl, and they started questioning the young child. The girl looked at Kyuubi and said, can you tell us your name? Kyuubi smiled warmly and said, well, that's a nice name. Touya looked at Kyuubi to see if she was lying, but she didn't see it. She smiled, something she hadn't done in a long time. Touya simply glared at Minato, saying, fuck off you horse fucking dick sucking cunt face she. Male looking fucking bastard. Minato, on the other hand, disagreed with his mate, saying, that name is okay I guess. When Minato heard this young girl, who was not even 10 years old, already knowing how to swear like a sailor, his mouth just hung open. Kyuubi simply laughed at her mate's look and carried on asking questions. Kyuubi scowled and knelt down to Touya, who was perplexed by Kyuubi's behavior. That's not true Touya. Chan, they're people who do care for you, Kyuubi said after hearing Touya sign. I don't have any been alone all my life, it's not like anyone gives a shit. Kyuubi had embraced Touya and rubbed her back as though she were her mother while she was saying this. Touya experienced a strange warmth that she had never experienced before while Kyuubi was doing this. For some reason, it felt right, and she didn't want it to go away. Touya was also experiencing something else that she was unable to describe, which was the accumulation of moisture in her eyes. Why am I crying? I never cried before, not when the orphanage starved and beat me, not when other kids made fun of me, not even when that bastard caretaker kept touching me, Touya said, rubbing her wrist, which was also wet. Ah Tira am I crying? She asked, continuing to stare at the moisture on her hand as tears streamed down her face. Before she knew why, Touya was on her knees sobbing more intensely than before when she felt two powerful arms lift her and carry her. As with Kyuubi, Touya looked to see that the Hokage had picked her up and held her close. She didn't understand what he was doing, but his smile gave her a sense of security. In a loving tone, Minato comforted the sobbing girl by holding her close to him and rubbing her back, just like a parent would. "It's okay, let it all out," he said. After hearing this, Touya's mental barrier broke, allowing a lifetime of tears and grief to spill onto Minato's shirt. An hour later, after a considerable amount of time, Touya finally calmed down, stooped to weep, and passed out. Then, Minato handed her Kyuubi, saying, "She has no place to stay for the night, right?" Kyuubi shook her head. "No, she's been staying at a broken down old shack for a while now." Minato crossed his arms and sighed. "Well, I guess we'll be having a house guest for a while, huh?" Kyuubi smiled and kissed him. "Arigato Minato-kun." Kyuubi simply said, "You know, I personally believe that Naruto would do well with a big sister around." Kyuubi just stared at him. Minato are. Minato interrupted, "I'll have all paperwork filled out by tonight. See you at home, Kyuubi-chan." Kyuubi smiled and started to walk home with Touya in her arms. "Another little kid for me to love." Returning with Hinata and Naruto. After returning to Hinata, Naruto knelt down and pleaded with her for forgiveness for abandoning her. He left, but Hinata didn't mind because she knew he would return. Instead, she used it as an excuse to give him a tail rub and an ear rub, which both kids enjoyed. Training field is empty. Naruto and Hinata went to one of the training fields later that day to put what they had learned in the academy thus far into practice. They began with taijutsu, tree climbing, meditation, a few laps, light exercises, and some shuriken target practice. The two were able to see their current areas of improvement with each practice. Hinata was more adept at controlling her chakras and dealt more hits to the shuriken's vital areas. Hinata could remain on the tree longer, but not for very long. She didn't last as long in the exercises and laps, and her taijutsu was slightly weaker than Naruto's. Despite having far more chakra than Hinata and having terrible chakra control, Naruto once blew up a tree. Before he could throw them with his tails, he needed to practice throwing with his hands, even though he was able to use more shuriken than she. He could easily complete the exercises for longer periods of time, and during the laps, he literally ran in a circle around Hinata. Although he lacked the agility to fight in taijutsu, he was able to use his tails to his advantage. Then, in order to replenish their energy, the two started to rest. However, Hinata chose to test Naruto during this time to see if he had actually studied the notes she had given him, and he surprisingly answered almost all of the questions correctly. They resumed their training after getting enough sleep, and eventually they pulled out a shogi board. Hinata persuaded Naruto to try, even though he initially didn't want to, aka puppy eyes and a little fake crying. They began playing Hinata because they believed it would improve their strategy and foresight. Naruto took some time to figure it out, but it was insufficient to defeat Hinata. It was time to go home after 30 games in which Naruto had lost. In order to be safe, Naruto asked Hinata if he could accompany her home on foot. Without hesitation, Hinata nodded. Just the two kids strolled through the village on their way to the Hyuga compound. Hinata was trying to construct the words to ask Naruto something important as they got closer to the compound. Naruto-kun, can I ask you something? Naruto looked at her and saw that she was flushed and putting her fingers together, which, despite how adorable it was, usually meant something negative. What's it, Hinata-chan? Hinata made an effort to maintain eye contact, saying, W. Well, I was wondering did you catch that thief? Naruto simply blinked. Yeah, I followed her to where she was staying, but Kasen showed up and took care of it. Hinata appeared to accept this, but Naruto could tell that something else was bothering her, so he decided to ignore it for the time being. As soon as they arrived at the Hyuga compound, Hinata said goodbye, but Naruto interrupted her. Hinata-chan, what's wrong? Hinata looked at him bewildered, and she stammered and blushed a little. What do you mean Naruto-kun? Hinata said. Naruto simply glared at her, asking, what's wrong? You've been acting strangely ever since you began discussing that thief earlier. Hinata could tell that Naruto was being serious at the moment, so she had no choice but to respond, Well, when you went after that thief for a long time and I noticed she was rather pretty. Naruto simply looked more perplexed, saying, well, I guess she was a little pretty. At this point, Hinata tried to swallow the lump in her throat, asking, Doa you a T? Thinka she's P. Prettier Thea M.me. At this point, Naruto sort of figured out what was wrong, asking, I'll admit that I only like a handful of girls, but I can honestly say you are the most beautiful and my best friend. Hinata blushed deeply, but she also smiled and gave Naruto a hug. Soon after, Naruto returned to the compound and went to his house. Her mother arrived as she was entering her house and strolling through the hallways and noticed her child's smile. Aki said, "So I take it the date went well." Still in a daze, Hinata simply replied, "Hi, it did." However, she quickly realized what she had said when she saw her mother grinning and said, "I.I.ITW. Wasn't a date," and she hurried to her room to cover her blush. She is so much like Heishi was at that age. Aki merely laughed. Alongside Naruto soon after arriving home, Naruto noticed his mother chopping vegetables, preparing dinner, and doing some dishwashing all at once. The joys of having 9 tails, he thought to himself. "Hello Naruto-kun. How was your date?" Kyuubi heard someone enter the kitchen and saw her son. Naruto blushed and yelled, "It was not a date." In a singing voice, Kyuubi said, "I'm not telling." Naruto simply blinked and said, "Guest, who is it?" Kyuubi simply rolled his eyes and said, "Okay, it wasn't a date, but could you be a little quieter, we have a guest." Naruto simply rolled his eyes and stared while helping to set the table. After everything was in order, Naruto saw his father, Otusan, enter his house. He gave him a hug. When Minato said, "Hey Naruto, how was your day?" Naruto simply grinned and said, "Well, I spent the entire day with Hinata-chan." At this point, he heard Kyuubi laugh, and Naruto scowled at her. Kyuubi turned to Naruto after everything was in order. "Naruto-kun, could you go and get our guest? She should be in the spare bedroom upstairs." "Okay, Kasen," Kyuubi said, and Naruto went to meet this enigmatic visitor. Only special guests like Tsunade, who was hiding from debt collectors, used the spare bedroom. In other instances, Jiraiya would use it to heal his body after Tsunade beat him to death for snooping on her in the hot springs. The strangest thing, though, was that occasionally the two would spend the night together. When they believed no one was watching, they put a seal on the room to keep people out and to block out noise. Naruto listened to see who was inside while standing in front of the door, but all he could hear was some gentle snoring. After hearing enough, Naruto knocked on the door and said, "Hello, guest. Sama, it's time for dinner." When he received no response, he tried again, saying, "Guest. Sama, it's time to get up and go to dinner." When he still didn't hear anything, Naruto became enraged and yelled, "Hey Baka, get up and come to dinner." He heard something close to the door and saw it swing up, and a certain red-headed person yelled directly into Naruto's face. When Naruto finally heard the ringing, he realized who it was and asked, "You're that thief from earlier today, what are you doing in my home?" Touya snarled at the obnoxious little brat in front of her, saying, "I'm in your fucking home because Kyuubi Sama brought me dipshit." Naruto didn't believe her, asking, "Why would my cousin allow a dirty thief like you into our home?" When he heard the dirty deed, she jumped at him, taking him by surprise, and put him in a headlock. Naruto initially fought, but the girl managed to hold him firmly despite his demon strength. She had an evil smile on her face as she struggled with the boy, asking herself, did that hurt her? "Tell me." Touya was enjoying herself when she didn't realize someone was standing behind her until it was right next to her and she saw Kyuubi standing there looking perplexed. Touya released Naruto and turned to Kyuubi, saying, "Kyuubi Sama, I'm sorry." Touya was genuinely sorry because she liked and respected Kyuubi, who simply grinned and said, "It's okay now if you two are done, dinner is ready," before leaving. "Hey kid, is your cousin always like that?" Touya asked Naruto as the two children stood there in confusion. "Most of the time, but there are moments where she can be a little freaky," Naruto replied, and Touya simply shuddered. Naruto merely glanced at her, Namikaze Naruto, and grinned like a fox as they soon started to walk to the dining hall. After an hour, Touya couldn't help but be glad to be with a family for once, even if it was only for a short while. Touya felt a hand on her shoulder just as she was ready to leave after dinner so she wouldn't overstay her welcome. She turned to see Kyuubi grinning at her and saying, "You don't have to leave just yet, Touya-chan." Touya turned to face Kyuubi and said, "I appreciate you letting me stay, Kyuubi Sama, and I do enjoy the company of your family, but I don't belong here." Kyuubi could tell the girl didn't want to get too close as she was ready to leave, but then she had the idea, "I was just about to take a nice hot bath and was wondering if you like to join me." At this point, Touya stopped, saying, "Ahoda bath." Both Kyuubi and Touya are later discovered in the house's bathing area, which was essentially a tiny private hot spring. Touya was lounging in the water, not making an effort to recall a moment when she had felt so good. Kyuubi was having a great time lounging in the water when she noticed something on Touya's back. A strange symbol of a circle with 4 crescent moons on either end of it was visible on the upper portion of her back. I realize this isn't the best way to describe it, but visit my profile page to see what I mean. Kyuubi was reminded of an old story she had heard as a child as she continued to stare at it. She had been adamant up until now that it was just a children's story, but she was beginning to have second thoughts. Touya knew it had something to do with the birthmark because she could feel Kyuubi staring at her back. Touya turned and looked at Kyuubi, asking, "Kyuubi, sama, there's something wrong?" Kyuubi shook her head, saying, "No, Touya-chan, nothing is wrong, just that I'm just wondering what that symbol on your back was." Touya just sighed, but this wasn't the first time someone had asked. "I don't really know what it is, I hate it on me since as long as I could remember why." Kyuubi simply crossed her arms and looked at her, looking completely surprised. "You have where?" Kyuubi said, "To be honest, it was in a storybook I read when I was young, and until now I thought it was just a story." Touya looked disappointed, but Kyuubi said, "If you stay for a little while, say a day or two, I might tell it." Touya was taken back to her room after her bath, given new clothes, and was about to go to bed when she heard a knock on the door. Now that she was angry, she was about to go to sleep when someone, mainly a certain little blonde fox bastard, was bothering her once more, so she grabbed the door and swung it open, asking, "What the hell do you want?" Instead of the obnoxious blonde fox, Kyuubi, a red-haired fox, was standing there. When Touya saw who it was, she immediately started to apologize, saying, "Kyuubi sama, I didn't realize it was you." Kyuubi simply smiled and said, "It's okay, Touya-chan, but try and tone down the swearing and don't call me sama, it makes me sound old. But aren't you supposed to be centuries old or something?" Touya thought to herself, but she didn't say it, but she saw Kyuubi glaring at her. "Were you making a comment about my age?" Touya simply blinked. No, she lied, but it didn't matter whether Kyuubi believed her when she entered the room. The kitsune simply grinned and said, "I thought I'd read you a story before you went to bed, Touya-chan." Touya was perplexed as to why Kyuubi was here, asking, Kyuubi, not to be rude or anything, but why are you here?" Touya just broke out in a cold sweat, saying, "Kyuubi, no offense, but I'm too old for something like that." "But Touya-chan, this story is a little different than most, and I think it will really catch your interest." Touya simply looked at it with some skepticism, saying, "As long as it's not those damn Icha paradise." Kyuubi simply laughed, "You're too young to enjoy a book like that, Touya-chan, but when you get a boyfriend it will be helpful." Touya blushed at this, and Kyuubi simply laughed at the girl's embarrassment, adding, "Anyway, the story I want to give you is this." Kyuubi handed Touya a black book with the word Nexus on it, but what really caught her attention was that the symbol on it was the same as the one on her back. Touya was thinking when a voice said, "So Kasen, what's this book about anyway?" Kyuubi and Touya turned to see Naruto standing there, while Kyuubi simply stared at her kit. "Naruto-kun, what are you doing up so late and how long have you been standing there?" Kyuubi asked. He was here the entire time, and Kyuubi and Touya just stared at him as Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said, "I couldn't sleep and I came in here about 2 minutes after you did Kasen." Inquiring, Naruto said, "So what's this Nexus story about anyway, Kasen?" "No, Naruto-kun, you have to go to the academy tomorrow and you need your rest," Kyuubi stated firmly, shaking her head. Even though she had used the thing most of the time to get Minato to agree, Naruto simply pouted and gave this Kyuubi cave in the puppy dog look. Kyuubi was genuinely curious and said, "Okay, Naruto-kun, you can stay, but you have to tell me where did you learn to do that so well?" However, Naruto simply grinned and said, "From you, Kasen," as Kyuubi's perspiration fell. Kyuubi sat between the two children and opened the book once they were both on the bed. Both children were taken aback when she did. Since Naruto was only 6 years old, he was disappointed that the book only contained words rather than illustrations. On the other hand, Touya was perplexed by the book's odd symbols, which she was unable to identify. At this point, both children thought, "How did she know?" Kyuubi simply sighed and said, "This book is really old, it's actually written in the oldest demon tongue, and if you want pictures use whatever little immunization you have, Naruto." After that, Kyuubi began to read the pages. Everything that is, was, and will be originates from the Nexus, the very center of creation, which is created and destroyed to keep oblivion in balance. At its core is a strong and sage immortal named Kronos, who is fused into machinery that enables him to maintain equilibrium by balancing the forces of chaos and order. Because Kronos was all powerful, he did not support either chaos or order. Instead, he he kept everything in balance. As a result, two other immortals were created, Orella, who represented order and all things good, and Abaddon, who represented chaos and death. Since their creation, the two have been at odds with one another. The two immortals would rely on demons to lead their armies and provide them with power in order to fight their wars. The demons would swear loyalty, and their deeds, whether good or evil, would provide the two immortals with life and power while maintaining their equilibrium. However, this did create a problem because there were only 4 races of demons, and only 2 would side with each immortal, leaving a lot of room for either side to take control if one race were to fall. To ensure that there was enough order and chaos, a 5th world of the world of Mortalsa was created, where residents could choose between order and chaos. The other worlds remained the same, with Solum and Aquas pledging to order and Etha and Volca pledging to chaos, while the world of mortals was used to ensure that the two sides could maintain equilibrium. At this point, Kyuubi saw that both Naruto and Touya were almost asleep. Okay, that's enough for tonight, it's time for little kids to go to bed. Both children looked disappointed, but Kasen weren't tired, Naruto said, struggling to control a yawn. Kyuubi simply put the book on a nightstand and said, "We'll finish another time, but now it's time for bed." Touya agreed that it was late and she needed to rest, and she took in. Just as she was about to close her eyes, she noticed something on her forehead, and when she opened them, she saw that Kyuubi had given her a good-night kiss, saying, "Good night, Touya-chan." The book stated that if both order and chaos were too far out of control, 2 champions, 1 male and 1 female human, would be chosen, Kyuubi said, grinning as she picked up Naruto and carried him to his room. His soft breathing indicated that he was already unconscious. Both would be endowed with demon power and serve as representatives of the 2 orders. Kyuubi put Naruto to bed and went to sleep after glancing at the room where Touya was sleeping and asking herself, if Touya is the female champion, does that mean that the male is out there somewhere? Somewhere in the country of water. A boy who appeared to be quite feminine was walking beside a missing nin with a large sword on his back and a smiling rabbit in his hand. The boy said to the missing nin, "Arigato for letting me keep him Zabuza-sama." Zabuza simply sighed in frustration, "Whatever Gaki, you just better take care of that thing or it will be my next meal, got it?" That boy is so innocent that it's sickening, Zabuza thought as he stood there, but the boy simply smiled, nodded, and ran ahead of him. The boy turned around and waved at Zabuza, saying, "Zabuza-sama, it's getting dark, we might want to reach a village soon." Zabuza didn't make eye contact, still deep in thought, explaining, "Just who or what are you, Haku?" Home in Namikaze. In the Namikaze family, morning had arrived. Kyuubi, Minato, and Touya, who was usually up early, were all seated at the table eating breakfast when everyone heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Naruto woke up and said, "Morning Aoda-san, morning Kasen," before sitting down next to Touya and saying, "Morning Nichan." At hearing this, Touya looked at Naruto like just grew another head. What did you call me?" Naruto just looked at her, "I called you Nichan since I heard you call my Kasen your Kasen, so that makes you my Nichan, now pass the milk." Touya just looked at him like he crazy and turned his parents to help, but the two just smiled at her. Naruto-kun, it's almost time to go to the academy, you better get ready, Kyuubi said, to which Naruto just agreed and went get ready. Touya was just sitting there letting Naruto's words really get to her until she felt a hand on her shoulder. "If you want to stay and be a part of our family, Touya-chan, I would more than happy to have you here, you call me Kasen." At hearing this, Touya looked at Kyuubi with a smile showing nothing but true happiness while tears were falling freely down her face as she ran up and hugged Kyuubi. At seeing this, Minato looked at the girl, a warm feeling in his heart knowing that another child was saved from the darkness that was loneliness. He walked over to the crying girl and got her attention. "So Touya-chan, would you like to become part of Namikaze family?" Touya Namikaze was welcomed into the family after glancing at the blonde Hokage and saying, "Hi, Aoda-san." In the academy, Naruto bumped into someone while he was walking to academy, a little distracted and unfocused. "Gomen, I wasn't looking where I was going." Naruto turned to face a boy who appeared to be about his age, but it was difficult to tell because of the big overcoat he was wearing and the sunglasses covering his eyes. The boy stared at him for a long time without saying anything until he finally said, "Be more careful." Naruto simply rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. "Well, my name is Namikaze Naruto. What's yours?" The boy simply stared at Naruto as he asked in a courteous manner, Aburame Shino." "Aburame, aren't you those guys who are supposed to have bugs inside your body or something?" Naruto thought at this point. Knowing this would happen, the boy named Shino asked how his clan lived. The moment he told him, they called him a freak, so he decided to end the conversation. "Hi, my clan is implanted with insects at birth," Shino said, waiting for the taunts. "Cool." This startled him because Naruto was simply grinning and had an interested expression in his eyes. Shino asked, "Aren't you disgusted about how wired I am?" And Naruto simply stared at him as if he were high. "Dude, you're calling yourself weird? You have 10 tails growing just above my butt, fox ears, fangs, and slanted eyes." The two nodded and started to walk to class after Shino laughed a little and held out his hand, saying, "Nice to meet you, Naruto. Sama, I hope we can be friends." Naruto shook Shino's hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Shino, and just call me Naruto, okay?" Naruto had to cover his ears when he first entered the classroom because of the loud, "Will you stop eating for 5 minutes?" and realized it was Ino Yamanaka. Ino went to the door to see who had just walked in and said, "Hi, Naruto." Naruto simply looked at her and said, "Ino, why did you have to shout? You know my ears are sensitive." Ino blushed and said, "Sorry about that, Naruto." Naruto simply looked at her, "Nani," indicating that his hearing was still gone. Ino approached him and yelled, "I said I was sorry." Naruto covered his ears once more, indicating that she had received the message. After hearing it, Naruto turned to face his classmates, but he only gave a few of them his full attention. Yamanaka Ino is a boisterous and somewhat critical girl who frequently teases weaker children in an attempt to boost their self-esteem. After she became friends with Ino, Haruno Sakura, a pink-haired girl who was a bit of a bookworm when it came to medical matters, began to advocate for herself. He doesn't appear to be too bad, and he likes the dog Akamaru, but occasionally he and Kiba didn't get along, which Kyuubi described as a species thing. Inuzuka Kiba is a little bit of a headstrong and occasionally overconfident in his abilities. He met Choji at the ramen stand and became good friends with him. Akamichi Choji was a big-boned boy who got along with everyone. This made some people question whether he had the heart to be a shinobi, but if they got angry, they would be proven wrong. Until it came to Shogi, which virtually no one could beat, and Hinata was the only person who came close. Nara Shikamaru was a lazy child who didn't really want to do anything. Uchiha, Duck-ass, Teme, Sasuke was a very talented academy student who was probably going to be named Rookie of the Year when he graduated. He also possessed the Sharingan, a dojutsu that Naruto disliked because it allowed him to replicate someone else's labors for his own gain and, for some reason, it also agitated the demon blood in him. Last but not least, despite their initial disagreements, Hyuga Hinata, his closest friend and best frienda, became his treasured companion and the year's best kunoichi. Shortly after, a man with a scar on his nose and one of Naruto's favorite senseis, Amino Iruka, appeared. Naruto smiled at the man, who was also a close friend of his family. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Iruka asked, holding his mouth open. "Iruka. Sensei, why do you smell like sake and Anko?" "Obasan." Iruka blushed at this, not wanting to explain what he and Anko were doing. After a few drinks and an apology, he said, "Me and Anko got together and had a few drinks, that's all." Naruto simply grinned, "So you two finally started dating, it's about time." At this point, Iruka's blushed even more. It was not a date. Naruto, now take your seat or it's a week of detention. Iruka had to use the jutsu he had learned from the Akamichi clan, Big Head no Jutsu, and yell, "Shut the hell up," which always worked, once everyone had sat down and stopped talking. He then stood in front of the class and said, "Now class, we have a new student today, and I like you to treat her with respect." After that, he looked at the door and said, "You can come in now." When the door opened, a girl with red hair, brown eyes, and a slightly older appearance than some of the children appeared. Hinata recognized the girl right away as the thief from yesterday, but she also noticed Naruto grinning for some reason. When the red-haired girl stood in front of the class, most of the boys were thinking about how attractive she was, and some of the girls were thinking about more competition for the teme. Touya simply stood there and cleared her throat, saying, "My name is Namikaze Touya." When she said, "I was just recently adopted into the Namikaze family, and if that's a problem with some of you, then go and fuck yourselfaced pieces of shit," everyone stared at her. Bitches who don't train but instead try to look attractive to get a guy's cock between their legs, cocky bastards who believe they're better because they have a dick, and fuckers who hold back are all things I dislike. I guess I don't really have any dreams for the future. At this point, everyone just looked at Touya, who was grinning. Iruka simply stared at the girl, astonished by her introduction, saying, Thank you for that very different type of introduction, Touya, but do you think you could refrain from swearing so much?" Touya simply looked at his sister, saying, "Hi Nei Chan," while Touya simply smiled at his new younger brother, saying, "Hi Ototo." Touyu's punch to Naruto's head kept him awake for the remainder of the class out of fear of what else his sister would do, but the rest of the day passed rather slowly, with the only interesting thing being Hinata nudging him a few times to keep him awake. It was soon time for lunch, and Naruto and Hinata decided to sit by his favorite tree as they always did, but this time, Naruto asked his sister to join them. Hinata wanted to protest because she wanted to spend time alone with Naruto, but she just agreed because she didn't want to offend Touya before they had gotten to know each other and make Naruto angry. As the tree sat there, they enjoyed their lunches. Naruto had ramen, Hinata had some dumplings, and Touya had some cinnamon rolls. However, Naruto had to leave the girls alone because he had to actually cook his food. After he left, Hinata gave Touya a barely perceptible glare, except for the fact that Touya had just swallowed a small portion of the dumpling before acknowledging Hinata. "Is there something you want to say, White Eyes?" "Look, White Eyes, if you have something to say, then spite it out already." Touya simply took another bite out of her dumpling before glaring at Hinata, who gasped and turned away. When Hinata realized what she had said, she snapped, "Stay away from Naruto Kun," and covered her mouth, while Touya simply grinned and said, "There was that so bad White Eyes." Touya blinked at this, saying, "So the reason you don't want me to stay away from Naruto is that you're afraid I'll take him away from?" Hinata looked at the ground and refused to make eye contact, saying, "Yeah, I don't want to lose Naruto-kun." The two did nothing for a while before Touya grew weary of the silence. When Hinata felt a hand on her shoulder, she looked up to see a smiling Touya. "There are two things wrong with that. One, Naruto is not my type, and two, I'm his Nei Chan for Kami's sake," Hinata said, not responding, instead continuing to stare at the ground, expecting Touya to be angry. Hinata blushed deeply at this point, saying, D. Don't love him we're J. Just F. Friends." Touya didn't believe a word of it, saying, "You're not fooling me. Look, just say it, no one around, and it will just be between us, okay?" Hinata realized how foolish she was just acting when she said, "Gomen," with genuine sorrow in her face, and Touya simply sighed. There is no reason to be sorry, as she was about to eat another dumpling. Hinata gazed directly into her eyes and said, "Promise." Then, looking around to see if anyone was nearby, Hinata blushed and turned to face Touya. "Hi, I do like Naruto-kun more than a friend." Touya nodded, pleased that the girl was opening up as she continued, saying, "Naruto-kun is strong and confident and never backs down from a challenge." Hinata smiled warmly and blushed at the memory, but he is also very sweet and kind, always tries to help, and always says the right thing when it's needed. He saved my life twice in one day, and he was my first kiss. Touya's mouth dropped open as she heard this, asking, "Are you fucking kidding me? You're like 6 years old. When the hell was this?" Hinata simply looked at her, "About 3 years ago." Touya slapped her head and moaned. After Touya's headache subsided, she had to ask, "So how did Naruto save you twice on the exact same day anyway?" Hinata then went on to describe how she and Naruto first met, how she used to be a doll to the elders, which caused Touya to scowl, how her mother reacted, and then how she pushed him into the pound, and why Naruto detested sushi, at which point Touya just collapsed to the ground, laughing while holding her sides. Finally, she described how they met Yugito and how the Cloud Nins attempted to kidnap her, but Naruto saved her. Touya simply whistled and shook her head, saying, "Never pictured my Ototo as the knight in shining armor, maybe the jester." The two simply grinned and said, "Nothing, just girl talk. You really wouldn't be interested now. Eat your food, class will start soon, and chew your food, damn it." Naruto returned shortly after with a steaming bowl of instant ramen. "Gomen, there was a line, so what did you two talk about while I was gone?" Tower of Hokage. Both Minato and Kyuubi were smiling as they watched the three kids through the crystal ball, and while they were pleased to see that Touya had gotten along well with others in her own way, something still bothered Kyuubi. Minato looked at his wife and said, "Kyuubi, Haim, I understand your fear, but as you said before, it's just a story after all." This didn't help at all, and he said, "Minato, I know I once thought it was a story, but after seeing that mark I'm not so sure anymore." Kyuubi then walked to the window and said, "I can feel something strange in the wind. I just wish I knew what it was."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.